Chairman Cassidy, Ranking Member Sanders, and members of the committee. It is an honor to appear before you as President Trump's nominee to lead the Department of Labor. My discussions with many of you have been insightful and inspiring, reinforcing my commitment to serve our nation's workforce. Under President Trump's bold leadership following his historic November victory, I am uniquely prepared to lead this department with resolve and purpose. Before I begin, I want to take a moment to honor the incredible people who have supported me throughout my 24-year journey in public service. My parents, who became ardent fans of C-SPAN when I entered Congress, are here today offering their unwavering support. My twin daughters, Emily and Annie. Emily was here last week, and I know with the postponement, but she couldn't come back. She's 36 weeks pregnant, lives in Michigan, and her doctor said no more flying. So, Emily, I know you're watching, and I know you support me here today. And Annie, one's a Democrat and one's a Republican, and they have been my steadfast defenders, teaching me patience and the value of an open mind. And finally, my loving husband, Sean, my high school sweetheart, who has stood by my side through every triumph and challenge. To all of you, thank you. Thank you for your boundless love and encouragement. I also want to thank the labor and business communities that are here in the audience today, because they support President Trump's vision for the American worker. I am deeply grateful to President Trump for this extraordinary opportunity to serve as the Secretary of Labor. It is both humbling and a call to action that I do not take lightly. In 2024, our nation witnessed the single greatest political achievement of our time. President Trump has united a new coalition of working-class Americans like never before, with 59.6% of Teamsters backing him, historic support from African American and Latino voters, and record-breaking turnout in once solid blue cities and states. Americans are speaking loud and clear. They are calling for action, progress, and leadership that puts the American worker first. Like many Americans, my journey is rooted in my values instilled by my father and mother. My father, a proud Teamster who worked tirelessly for over 30 years. The fair pay and benefits he received ensured our family's stability and security. From his example, I learned the transformative power of hard work and determination, propelling me to become the first in my family to graduate from college with a degree in business administration. Later, after supporting my husband through medical school, we built our own small business. For 2 decades, we successfully navigated the challenges faced by employers, from complex labor regulations to workforce shortages and rising costs. These experiences have given me invaluable insights into the struggles and triumphs of American business owners. Insights I carried with me as mayor of one of the fastest growing Oregon communities and later as a member of Congress. In every role, my priority has been clear: to fight for the American worker and the business that drive our economy. Our current economic landscape has changed dramatically since my father worked in a creamery, demanding bold action and real change. In the last 4 years, prices have risen, wages have fallen, and 78% of Americans do not feel confident that their children will lead better lives. We have also seen major companies like Hino Motors, General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis have accelerated layoffs at facilities across the country. To rebuild confidence and strengthen our workforce, we must invest in educational pathways beyond the traditional 4-year degree, ensuring that every American worker has access to the skills and training for long-term success. Part of that effort requires honest discussion about our labor policies. I know there has been a lot of conversation about my support of the PRO Act. Like President Trump, I believe our labor laws need to be updated and modernized to reflect today's workforce and the business environment. As a member of Congress, the PRO Act was the bill to have those conversations. Conversations that matter deeply to the people of Oregon's 5th Congressional District. I recognize that that bill was imperfect, and I also recognize that I am no longer representing Oregon as a lawmaker. If confirmed, my job will be to implement President Trump's policy vision, and my guiding principle will be President Trump's guiding principle, ensuring a level playing field for businesses, unions, and most importantly, the American worker. I also know that we will not always agree, but I promise there will never be surprises. My door will always be open, and I will never put my thumb on the scale. That commitment extends to the work ahead of the Department of Labor, which stands at a crossroads with a vital role in shaping a strong and resilient economy. As we confront these challenges, I know that everyone in this room shares the same goal: an economy where every American has the opportunity to thrive through good wages, safe working conditions, and a secure retirement. My record of collaboration demonstrates a shared belief that under President Trump's leadership, we can deliver real solutions. Putting American workers first is not just a vision, but a promise to fight for every working mom, single dad, small business owner, and every American striving for their fair shot at the American dream. If I have the privilege of being confirmed, I look forward to working with each of you to solve the challenges facing our country. Together, we can shape our economy that uplifts every American. I thank you. I thank this committee, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. I'll begin. First question, the Protecting the Right to Organize Act, or the PRO Act, is a significant and controversial piece of legislation Democrats have championed for years. And it's not pro-worker, it's pro-big union. To my mind, being pro-worker means defending the right of all workers, including those who decide they don't want to join a union. Now, you co-sponsored the PRO Act as a member of Congress. Yes or no, do you still support the PRO Act?
Thank you, Chairman Cassidy. It was great to visit with you. I know how important this issue is to you, and as it was said today, I recognize that I'm no longer the lawmaker, and I do not believe that the Secretary of Labor should write the laws. It will be up to Congress to write those laws and to work together. What I believe is that the American worker deserves to be paid attention to. That was President Trump and I's conversation in supporting the American worker, how important that is. I will not be that lawmaker anymore, but I was working for Oregon's 5th Congressional District and representing that. I wanted to be at that table. I never want to be left out of a conversation where we can talk about the American worker and how important that is. And I respect the right of the right to work states, and I have said that the bill was imperfect. I understand that, and I'm no longer the lawmaker.
Okay. Now, the PRO Act, just to continue on that, would significantly impact franchisees and small businesses by increasing corporate control of the operations, or at least assuming that there's increased corporate control. This is yet another giveaway to large labor unions. It would make it easier to negotiate, the union to negotiate with large corporations instead of directly with the small business owner who actually employs the worker. So, question, do you believe federal law should prioritize policies that help small businesses thrive rather than imposing new regulatory hurdles which could hinder their success?
Senator, it's important for recognizing that the president's goal is to uplift all business owners and uplift all American workers. Understanding the franchise business model is important to the American workforce. I supported the overturning of the NLRB rule on joint employer to support the franchise business model and supported the president in this. And I align that this is important to grow this economy and recognize the flexibility in people choosing where they want to do business.
So by that, am I to take that you would commit to reexamining DOL's joint employer guidance to provide small businesses with a clear roadmap on the issue?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Certainly, if confirmed, I'll be looking at all regulations and determining and looking at all of these rules and regulations, and specifically that one.
And I think the small employer wants that clear roadmap.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Next question. Approximately 27 million workers work as independent contractors, including working moms, caregivers, self-employed business owners. Now, for many, the flexibility of independent work is essential to balancing personal responsibilities and earning a living for their family. I will point out that the PRO Act tried to impose a one-size-fits-all rule, which, as was done in California, disrupted livelihoods instead of helping workers. So question, If confirmed as Secretary, will you commit to refrain from implementing any rules stripping independent contractors of flexibility they need to provide for their families and to simultaneously contribute to the American economy?
Thank you, Senator. Certainly, we'll commit to understanding this. I know the president in the first administration set out that rule, and the parameters is very important to him on the flexibility of who is an independent contractor and who is an employee, and that they're properly classified. But I commit to working with you on supporting independent contractors through this process, because that flexibility is what needed. I understand, as you're mentioning in the PRO Act, but again, as I mentioned, that bill wasn't perfect, and these are those conversations that needed to be had, and supporting that independent contractor is key to growing this economy.
Now, supporting that independent contractor, and something I'm very interested in, is how do we provide the independent contractor with more affordable health and retirement benefits without losing that work flexibility? If you will, the employer, the person contracting with them, not an employer, would nonetheless be able to give them access to such benefits. I'm asking you if you will work with me and with our committee on legislation to make sure that the independent worker and the small business are able to get the affordable benefits available to ordinary employees at larger companies.
Yes, sir, I will commit to working with you wholeheartedly on this issue.
With that, I will yield to Chairman Sanders, the ranking member Sanders.
I'll take the chairman.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Cassidy. You're not the Congresswoman from Oregon anymore, right?
No, sir.
Okay. You're trying to become Secretary of Labor. Let me back up and say a word about what the PRO Act is. I'm not sure that most Americans know what it is. The reality is that in America today, labor unions have the support of some 70% of the American people. You know why? Because people understand that the big corporations and their bosses have all the power. People understand that CEOs make 300 times more than their workers. And people say, you know what, the only way we're going to get decent wages and benefits is when we organize. Millions of people want to join unions, but they can't join unions. You know why? Because corporations day after day operate in illegal ways. They break the law. They say to somebody, you were late 3 years ago. You're a pro-union, you were late 3 years, you're fired. We're going to take you into a captive audience, and for hour after hour, we're going to tell you how bad unions are. You want to join a union? Fine, you vote for a union, we're moving the plant to China. All of that stuff happens to be illegal. All of that stuff happens to be done every single day by corporate America. So, let me go back to the original question. PRO Act is designed to prevent illegal behavior on the part of corporate America, on the part of employers, so that workers can make a free choice. Do you support the PRO Act?
Thank you, Ranking Member Sanders, and I appreciate the conversation. I support the American worker. President Trump.
Okay, I don't mean to be rude.
No,
we
you're
don't
not
have
rude.
a lot of time.
I
I'm
understand.
gathering that you no longer support the PRO Act, is what I hear. That you support the American worker, that's what everybody here will say. Ms. Chavez-DeRemer, in 2021, President Biden signed the Bush-Lewis Act that prevented the earned pension benefits of some 2 million union workers and retirees from being cut by up to 65%. There are people in Congress who want to undo that enormously important legislation. What do you feel about the Bush-Lewis Act?
I support the Bush-Lewis Act in protecting their retirements.
And you will go to the wall, to go to the mat supporting it?
I do support protecting people's retirements.
Federal minimum wage is 7.25. State after state has voted to raise the minimum wage. Somehow we can't do it here in Washington. 20 million workers are making less than $15 an hour. Do you support raising the minimum wage to a living wage?
Ranking Member Sanders, you know that that is an issue for Congress to determine and raising the minimum wage. As the Secretary of Labor, I cannot weigh in on that. That's determined by Congress if they want to negotiate that. I will fully and fairly enforce the law as a Labor Secretary if you all so choose, and give you whatever data possible to make that decision as members of Congress.
Well, I understand that Congress makes the law, but you have an opinion, and you will be the leading advocate for workers if you are confirmed. Question, if you were sitting where I'm sitting, would you vote to raise the minimum wage to a living wage?
Well, I'm not sitting where you're sitting hypothetically. I used to, but not any longer. But I do recognize that the minimum wage hasn't been raised since 2009, and the cost of living has gone up. But again, I cannot sit here and determine what that wage will be fully and fairly. I will enforce the law, but it will be up to Congress to determine, because that is not in the purview of the Secretary of Labor. For instance, in Oregon, I know that in Portland, Oregon, that the minimum wage is almost $16 an hour, and that might work for Portland, but that's not going to work for Grants Pass, Oregon. And I know that local communities, states determine what's best for their economy. What we don't want to do is shock the economy. But again, sitting here today, I cannot determine as Secretary of Labor if it should be.
Ms. Chavez-DeRemer, in his second week in office, President Trump fired Gwen Wilcox, a member of the National Labor Relations Board, leaving the NLRB without a quorum. And what that means right now, that if workers form a union, vote to form a union, and the company says, well, I think that was illegal, it's unfair, you can slow up the process because there's nobody to go to. Do you believe that the firing of Ms. Wilcox was illegal? Which I do.
President Trump has a right to exercise his executive power, how he sees in consultation with.
Are you concerned that we do
team.
not have a functioning NLRB right now?
The NLRB is separate from the Department of Labor, but
understand
I
that.
do believe that the function of the NLRB is important, and I will always take that into consideration doing my
Are you
job.
concerned that we do not have a functioning NLRB now?
Well, again, I have not been read in with President Trump, but he has a right to exercise his executive power, and I do believe the NLRB has an important role, independent of the Department of Labor, and I respect their position as an independent agency.
Thank you.
Senator,
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Congresswoman, for coming on out and talking to us. In your opening statement, your written testimony, you talked about putting American workers first as the priority here, and I appreciate that. I think a lot of us agree with that. I guess I just want to ask you, because you talked about the vision that you have for that should be a vision for our country. So I guess I wanted to ask you to sort of expand on that vision. Is $7.25 an hour, is that enough to live on in America in the year 2025?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. I know Ranking Member Sanders asked the same question. I recognize that it hasn't been changed, the minimum wage.
I guess I'm just asking you, do you think that's enough for a worker to live on? I'm just trying to get a sense of your vision for what the standard of life for an American worker is.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, for every state, for every community, again, I mentioned Oregon. What happens in Portland doesn't happen in Grants Pass. It certainly doesn't happen over in
I understand that about
Eastern
Oregon, but I guess I would ask you, what is $7.25 an hour? That is what in an annual term? Do you know off the top of your head?
Oh,
It's not a math question.
Yeah.
So I'm just trying to get a sense of it. So it's about $15,000 a year.
yeah.
So I guess I just want to ask you, do you think that there is a state in this country where someone can live comfortably on their own for $15,000 a year?
Well, I don't know if there is, but I would look and work with Congress. This is a congressional issue. I hope I can support you in telling the story of what's happening on the ground.
But
so
that's
that you
what
can
I'm just trying to
determine-
get a sense of from you is what your vision is. Because I do want to try to engage and see if we can work on that together. So for instance, biggest issue I keep hearing about is about affordability of housing and the challenges that people are facing when it comes to that. So again, I'm just trying to get a sense of where you're at on this. Like, do you have a sense of what percentage of someone's salary should go towards housing? Is there an upper limit in your mind of where you'd like to see that?
Well, I know oftentimes they talk about, if it's 10%, 20%, but here's my commitment, Senator. My commitment to you is to tell that story. I will come out and visit every state's and understand what's important to them and tell that story not only to the president, but also work with members of Congress. And if you all see fit, I will fully and fairly enforce the minimum wage laws that you all see fit and work together. I know, again,
It needs to be a conversation between us here.
it's
I mean,
important.
it's not just
Yeah.
on us. You're going to be somebody who's supposed to be fighting for
Sure.
the American worker. Is 50% of someone's salary too high in terms of what goes towards housing?
Well, again, depending on what the salary is, people can determine that. I mean, if I had to take a guess, you're wanting me to say yes or no. It's hard to guess on what people want to spend on their housing, but I do want to help the American worker. I want them to make enough money. I want them to give them their opportunities, and I want to work with Congress on this issue because it is important. This is a sensitive issue. We hear about it all the time. You know that, and I know
It's,
that.
as I said, the top issue. And I'll say that, when it comes to the lowest median rents that we see in this country right now, it's around $850, $900 a month, which is at around $10,000 a month. And
What
these
I
are
do
in some of
know-
the states where, again, the minimum wage is $15,000 a year. So
Yeah.
talking about 2/3 of their salaries. When it comes to paid leave, I mean, I know a colleague of mine was going to raise this. We were able to move forward on government employees. I want to just get a sense, do you believe that all American workers are entitled to paid leave?
Again, we don't have a federal paid leave.
Should we?
Well, that, again, I know as a
I'm
Department
just
of
trying to
Labor-
get a sense of your vision. I get it. You're not
know.
a lawmaker anymore, but I'm just trying to get a sense of what you're going to be fighting for. What's your vision for the American worker?
Well, my vision for the American worker is to achieve the American dream.
I
That they
understand
have
that,
the
but is part of the
opportunities.
American dream paid leave for all workers?
Well, again, I cannot commit to you today that I would say 100% paid leave across the board is something that should be taken up by the federal government. Independent of states, state of Oregon, again, they choose to do that respective of their states. I want people to have the opportunities to keep more of their hard-earned dollars. I know the president, again, is in line with the America First agenda to have those freedoms, to keep those hard-earned dollars that they earn, and we want to make the most prosperous opportunities available for them to earn the most based on what they are skilled to do, and offer them the development and the skills that they can to earn that opportunity. I want this more than anything.
Yeah, and look, I want it too, and that's why, if confirmed, I want to work with you on this.
Absolutely.
But I'll just tell you, when I talk to workers back in New Jersey, they say it feels like death from a thousand cuts right now. There's housing, there's healthcare, there's so many other things. They're working 2 to 3 jobs just to be able to get by. They're not asking for the moon. They're just asking to be able to live a life of dignity and decency. And I hope that we can at least be able to stand up and say that that's what we're going to fight for. I yield back.
Thank you,
Thank you, Senator Kim.
Ms. Chavez-DeRemer, when we met, you expressed your strong support for registered apprenticeship. So I want to dig a little bit deeper on that last question you were asked. That was reassuring to hear, particularly in light of the first Trump administration's effort to fund non-registered apprenticeships, or IRAPs, as they're called. You also said that you had not yet had an opportunity to talk with the president about policy at the time we met. Have you had the opportunity to talk with the president about about registered apprenticeships? And if so, has that changed your position?
No, thank you, Senator, on that issue. It is so important on the registered apprenticeships and really investing and even doubling down on that. I know in the first administration, and I haven't talked to the president on the first administration's policies compared to now on apprenticeship from the last administration, but I think there's a lot to learn from what happened in the first administration and the successes and not successes. But right now, we're focused on the registered apprenticeships, growing those, investing in those, and making sure that those are adhered to.
Thank you. I want to also dig a little bit deeper on appropriated funds. The Labor, Health and Human Services Appropriations Bill includes dedicated funding for apprenticeship programs and specifies that the funding is only available for registered apprenticeships. So I ask this in the context of actions this administration has already taken, including a government-wide funding freeze that has now been halted by the court. As ranking member of the Labor, Health and Human Services Appropriations Subcommittee, I have a particular interest in the department implementing our bill as Congress intends. That is why I was so alarmed to see the National Institutes of Health flaunt the law last week when it proposed a policy that directly conflicts with longstanding appropriations language in the Labor HHS bill. The Labor HHS bill says that you can't do it, and NIH said it was doing it anyways. My question to you is, will you follow the law that says funding for apprenticeship programs can only be used for registered apprenticeships, yes or no?
Yes.
more broadly, do you commit to spending funding as Congress appropriates it?
Yeah, again, as I mentioned earlier, it was asked, as a former member of Congress, I highly respect the appropriations process and the role of Congress.
Thank you.
Yes.
The nation's nurses face challenging working conditions, and they are too frequently exacerbated by instances of workplace violence. We talked about that in my office. I appreciated that you said that you really take that issue seriously. Right now, the Department of Labor plans to issue a notice of proposed rulemaking in June of this year for the workplace violence in healthcare rulemaking. Do you commit to getting this proposed rule issued by June of this year and finalized in a very timely way?
Well, I can commit to working with you on the issue because it is an important one. And if confirmed, I will look at every rule as it moves forward. But until then, I haven't even seen specifically on the rule. But I commit to working with you and taking a look at
Close
it.
conversation on that.
Yes.
We've been waiting a long time. It's past due. Your opening statement mentioned putting workers first. You've repeated that a number of times. So I hope to have your commitment to aggressively pursue enforcement against employers that deny workers the wages they've earned or fail to provide safe working conditions. The Department of Labor plays a critical role in protecting workers' rights, including ensuring workers get the back pay they are owed and investigations into allegations of child labor law violations. If confirmed, I look forward to working with you to make sure that the department has the resources to do this important work. Can you commit to me that this important work will continue under the Department of Labor, at the Department of Labor under your leadership, yes or no?
Yes.
Can you confirm that information under the Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division on their website will remain up to date, publicly accessible, and comprehensive like it is today? Yes or no?
Again, I have not been at the Department of Labor. I have not, but I look forward to working with the agency heads and making sure that people have the information that they need.
All right, one last question. The Women in Apprenticeship and Non-Traditional Occupations Grant Program.
Senator Baldwin, time's expired.
All right, I will submit that for.
Thank you, Senator.
The chair recognizes Representative Molinar.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Secretary
Nice to see you.
Chavez-DeRemer. Nice to see you. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here with us
Sure,
today.
glad to be here.
And I've appreciated our conversations over the years, and you represented a state that has a lot of agricultural activity, and understand, I know based on your time in Congress, you were involved in the workforce issues and agriculture, and I want to follow up on some of the discussion you've already had on the H-2A AWR situation in Michigan. Have you been to Michigan before?
Oh, sir, I used to live in Michigan.
Well, we need you to come
I
back.
used to live in Ann Arbor, and my daughter lives in Saginaw now, so
Okay.
I was just there visiting
Well-
my grandson, so yeah.
Well, we want you to come back, and
Glad to
we'd
do it.
love to have you meet with some of our farmers. Some are fifth, sixth generation fruit growers, vegetable growers, who are really under tremendous financial stress right now. And it's because of a federal mandate that increases the cost of labor for them, the H-2A. And so in Michigan, you have these farmers where they're paying transportation for their workers, they're paying housing, and then they're also forced to pay over $18 an hour. And they just can't make it anymore. And so there's an urgency. It's a huge importance. I know, based on your willingness to work on this, and I appreciate that, and I know the chairman talked with you about it. What I would propose is working with Secretary Rollins. We brought this up the other day in the agricultural subcommittee, and she pledged to work on this as well. And I think the two of you and your teams working together, I know we've already done some calls on this, could really help resolve this. And I know there's a process that needs to take place, but there's also an urgency. So I've introduced legislation similar to what Representative Clyde mentioned, pausing
the increase for 2 years, just to give some relief as we work on a longer-term solution. And I know, some of the litigation issues, and you don't necessarily want to comment one way or another, but I would welcome your technical input on that legislation and would welcome being part of any work group that could be established to help resolve this both on a short-term basis as well as a long-term basis.
Absolutely. And so any technical assistance that we can give you through the Department of Labor, ETA, and specifically glad to do it as you follow through with any legislation that Congress is working toward. As in regards to Secretary Rollins, we visit often in regards to how the workforce and agriculture really collide all the time. And then working with Secretary Noem as well on just the H programs. One of the things that I heard as a member of Congress and in working with a lot of you was the dedication on just the systems in play themselves. And sometimes navigating that for our farmers and ranchers has been quite difficult. And so we're working on that through the Department of Labor, and I've directed my team to make sure that there is a dedicated focus to either members of Congress and or respective states who need to say, I just need some help navigating this, because time is money. We understand that. We understand the workforce matters. And so we're working hard in that process, and I'll continue to do so. Really at the direction of the President, that we have seen that all secretaries to work together to understand what's happening. And then the workforce, that pipeline is much needed oftentimes, and is so different in every state.
Thank you. And I also just wanted to follow up, being familiar with Michigan as you are, Mackinac Island is a very
yes,
special place.
been there.
And, one of the things a lot of people don't realize is the H-2B visa is very much in use there. Because of the process where there's a cap on that, and sometimes there's a lottery where people don't know if they're going to get, the H-2B workers that they need, they're in a situation where they don't know if they can open their business. And so it actually costs American jobs, because businesses that employ H-2B workers as well as local area workers don't have that certainty. And it would be an issue of working with Secretary Noem and yourself, and we would welcome your help lifting that cap, or at least providing the certainty so that more people can get the workers they need on Mackinac Island.
No, thank you for bringing that up. It's important, and I'll continue to work with the other secretaries as it takes all different agencies to determine this, and streamlining that and working together is going to be key, and we'll continue down that road so that it's more efficient for the people who are using the programs themselves.
Can I ask one last quick question? I've been meeting, in Michigan, we have 83 counties. A lot of the counties have county fairs. They have, the carnival rides
Sure.
and the workforce they need for that. That's another area where I would ask you to consider what options might be available, because that's so important to the rural communities.
We want to grow all the workforce that's needed here to supplement and supply our American workers and our American businesses. So I will. And if you can, at that fair, have some Mackinac Island fudge ice cream, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
Hey, you'll bet.
The chair now recognizes Representative Bice.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Secretary Chavez-DeRemer for being with us this morning. And thank you for speaking with me recently about my initiative of filing legislation on paid family leave that I introduced. I am excited to be part of the bipartisan paid family leave working group, where we spent a year and a half talking to stakeholders and crafting legislation to address the lack of paid family leave options in what I believe is a responsible way. The More Paid Leave for More Americans Act, H.R. 3089, will provide a modest incentive for states to establish their own family leave programs using a public-private partnership model. And to be clear, this bill is not a mandate. It is an incentive that recognizes that states are already leading the way in many spaces, and we want to support that. And there is a tie-in, certainly with the Department of Labor, potentially having an oversight of this particular program. So thank you for giving me some time to talk to you about that. Secretary, Oklahoma, like 26 other states, is a right-to-work state. And President Biden issued an executive order 14063 in 2022 requiring the use of project labor agreements on all federal construction projects over $35 million. This actually limits competition for the projects and results in many projects bringing in crews from out of state. Earlier this year, the Federal Court of Federal Claims ruled that the collective bargaining agreement requirement violated the Competition and Contracting Act by excluding responsible offers that are capable of performing the contract. I am working on legislation to ensure that no further PLA agreements are placed on federal contracts in the future. With only 11% of the workforce unionized, will you continue to support a free market and ensure fair competition across the workplace?
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to go back just quickly on the legislation, and the Department of Labor, again, as was mentioned, will provide any technical assistance that we can offer as you move legislation through Congress, anything that we can do to help out on that, because you're right, as an oversight, if it was to come to fruition, it would be through the Department of Labor. So thank you, because we understand, that is a growing concern amongst a lot of our working families.
The U.S. is one of 7 developed nations in the world that does not have a structured paid family leave program. And so my colleagues and I, bipartisan and bicameral, actually are looking to try to solve that, and we look forward to working with your department.
Great, and thank you. And then again, on right to work, as was mentioned in my hearing and mentioned here today, it's a fundamental tenet of labor law that states have a right to choose if they want to be a right to work state or if they want to unionize. And again, from the Secretary's office, that's left up, to those states. Now on this, the specific PLA that you're talking about was not really a Department of Labor law, but we want to work with every state in order to understand that we want to grow the workforce. That has been really at the fundamental core of President Trump's agenda, is to grow this economy and not get out of our own way, so to speak. And so from the Secretary's office, we want to make sure that we're supporting growing that workforce in any way that we can.
Well, speaking of the workforce, in April, the jobs report beat expectations by 40,000 jobs, showing that President Trump has strengthened the private sector and is growing Main Street America. Can you describe your work on removing some of the burdensome regulations that have allowed wages to grow and how the committee can partner with you to keep the momentum going?
Yeah, thank you. And again, I would like to go back even 1 month prior to that. And we did blow it out of the water, and I think that that's what's important to answering the call of the market and what's happening. 228,000 jobs in one, and then 177,000 jobs, and those are above expectations. And I would imagine we will continue down that road in growing this workforce because of the flexibility and modernization of labor law. And I think that that's been key for not only my agency, but with our business and our labor, wherever they are in the continuum, that we will continue to reduce those barriers so we can grow the American workforce first and stay focused on the American worker. And every conversation that I had with each and every one of you will always come from the pinnacle of the American worker first.
Very much appreciate that. That's an important aspect of the tenet of small business, but also of your organization. So we appreciate your time and dedication to the country. Thank you for your service. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield.
The chair recognizes Representative Elsey.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Ranking Member. Madam Secretary, it's good to see you again.
Nice to see you too, Congressman.
We were on the same hallway up in Longworth on the 7th floor, and it's good to see you back in an even greater position. I'm going to use a little sarcasm here. You've been on the job for 66 whole days. How do you not know everything already? I'm shocked and I'm saddened that you don't know everything right now.
I'm grateful.
66 days. I mean, we interviewed the Secretary of the Navy yesterday. He'd been on the job for 50 days. I want to say, other than him, you might be the most traveled secretary because the president has sent you all across the country to actually do your job. How many days have you been traveling in the last 66?
Oh, gosh. We've been on the road. We've visited 8 states, and I don't know the exact number of days, but I was just back from a 12-day.
Well, that's a lot of travel. You're not spending time in the office, decorating the office. You're out in the workforce doing your job. And I think that you need accolades for that instead of criticism for it. You were raised, was your dad a single father?
No. My parents were married and are still married. I think they celebrated 60 years. But my dad was a Teamster and worked hard.
And that was in Hanford, which was where I was stationed. So we have that in common. Hanford in the Central Valley of California, where there's a lot of agriculture, and he worked hard to raise you.
That's right.
And I think that our colleagues on the other side need to recognize that you're probably the most well-rounded Secretary of Labor that has been on both sides, has had a difficult upbringing, has had a life in which you had to work, and you are perfectly suited for this job. And I think that everybody should want to work hard with you on this venture of making life better for the American worker. The American workforce is facing a growing skills gap in infrastructure critical industries across the nation's economy. The return on investment for a four-year college, as we've discussed, has decreased to the point Americans have been discouraged by the prospect of having to go to school and have too many in loans. For too long, we've emphasized this as the sole path to the middle-class American dream, but I think we're getting away from that now. So community colleges and trade schools provide hands-on specialized training directly relevant to the job market. So it's great to hear from your testimony that almost 83,000 new apprenticeships have been registered. I'm currently working on legislation called the Apprenticeship Infrastructure Tax Credit Act, say that 3 times fast, incentivizing more apprenticeships across the board with an additional focus on recent military and military spouses. The President's goal of creating 1 million new apprenticeship opportunities is noble. So how might a targeted apprenticeship tax credit for employers complement the Department's efforts to expand registered apprenticeships?
Well, certainly we want to remove all barriers, and I think that that's something that we hear across the board from. And so I look forward to hearing what, this type of legislation that you'll work with your colleagues on, because again, we want to grow the workforce. And oftentimes, at least in my past experience, certainly in Department of Education and Labor, oftentimes it was access because of funding. And we see that across the board, whether it's expanded Pell Grants or any of those types of things, anything that we can do to grow that workforce and not make people make a decision where they want to continue or have to stay where they are, but they have options. And so I look forward to offering, again, that technical assistance that you may need in order to work with your colleagues if Congress so chooses to do that bill. I think that would be something that could be definitely beneficial to the workforce as well.
Well, I think that's great because employers, not the federal government, but employers make the biggest investment in apprentices through the payment of wages and paid training. And what policies outside the current grant appropriations is DOL considering supporting?
Well, anything that we can do to assist the public-private partnerships, and how, again, as I meet with either business owners, employees, unions that come into the Department of Labor, the goal is to, how can we get to yes? I mean, for far too long, the government has, we don't want them to be an adversary, we want them to be an ally. How can we assist and how can we help? And at the direction of the President, it is to go out there and get to a yes in growing this workforce and protecting our American workers, and at the same time, fulfilling, again, the mission of the Department of Labor, which is protecting those wage earners, those job seekers, and those retirees as they move through their entire continuum of being in the workforce.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Madam Secretary.
Good morning.
It's a pleasure to see you today and wish you congratulations for stepping up in this role, and
Appreciate it.
really so appreciate your leadership, your dedication, and I think almost most importantly, your positive attitude that you bring to this job. So thank you profusely for that. We look forward to working with you. Appreciated the phone call the other day. Thank you so much. As you know, it is very important to me to maintain the integrity of the independent contractor relationship. In my state, the great state of Tennessee, we value this on both sides. And it has worked so well. And I know earlier this month, the department's Wage and Hour Division issued an announcement that is currently working to reformulate the test as to how independent contractor status is determined under the Fair Labor Standards Act. And I just wanted to ask you how we can be helpful in that process, and just thank you for your commitment to maintaining that.
Yeah, so subject to again, as we do the rulemaking and litigation, I can't comment specifically, but we did issue through the Wage and Hour Division the Field Assistance Bulletin so that there is some certainty for the workforce and how to navigate this until the Department of Labor continues down the road of that. So what I ask is, it is about not only working with members of Congress on both sides of the aisle to understand what this means in your respective states, and you are sharing with me on how important this is to Tennessee. But again, technical assistance back and forth and how we work together is going to really round out how we're going to move forward in the future on this. But more flexibility and modernization is what the workforce is asking for. And we want to grow the workforce at all costs, so we're going to do everything we can to assist you in that.
Thank you so much. Madam Secretary, question about Jobs Corp. These are skilled trades people, a lot of young Americans who are waiting to engage in that program. It's my understanding that currently that may be on hold, and I would just like to know when we might expect some type of resuming of that enrollment in Jobs Corp.
No, thank you for bringing that up. Again, there are so many Job Corps centers throughout this country that have dedicated time, but there has been a report that we have released from the Department of Labor most recently in relation to all of these centers, the Job Corps Transparency Report, and I highly encourage all members of Congress, if you have a Job Corps center, to take a look at this, and it is publicly available. The Job Corps program has a price tag of nearly, $1.7 billion per year, and we owe it to the taxpayers to be transparent about what is happening. So the average cost per student is about $80,000, and the average cost per enrollee, regardless of their length of stay, is about $50,000. So there have been some concerns with that, and we see for the signaling from the president's budget that we want to take a refocus and a relook on, are we really focused on where those dollars are going to have the outcome for the workforce? This is a population that we also deeply care about. As a member of Congress, I was a Job Corps champion. From what I have discovered through this process, I do want to work with each and every one of you in understanding how we move forward to train this population, especially the 16 and 17-year-olds that we have. We need everybody in the workforce. And so we have no final decision. We'll keep looking as we do more of this reporting, but I highly encourage, I would like to work with each and every one of you individually on this. This is an important issue.
And I thank you for your response. And I will close by saying this, Madam Secretary, so appreciate the fact that you want to visit all the great 50 states.
Including Tennessee.
Including the great volunteer states. So I welcome you to our state. Our state is one of those states where we cherish our employers, our employees, our independent contractor relationships. We are booming in the great state of Tennessee. People are coming all across our great state. So I do welcome you there and wish you continued success. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll yield back.
Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and we appreciate your opening statement, and we look forward to doing our round of questions, and all the members will have 5 minutes. I try to be a little bit lenient on the 5-minute rule because sometimes you're in the middle of a question or in the middle of an answer, and to finish that thought, but obviously to make sure that we have time for everybody, and there'll be members that'll be coming in and out. I do appreciate all the members when I start tapping to start wrapping up as we move forward. I'd like to start out by asking about the adverse effect wage rates. And as you well know, family farms are essential to the economy of all America, but in particular, I see it in the economy of the district I represent and in North Alabama. Unfortunately, under the previous administration, the H-2A labor rates required of agriculture employers became more and more unaffordable. And actually to the point that many family farms and specialty crop growers are at risk of being forced to close their farms. I know this is an issue that you are very familiar with, and because of that, I want you to commit to working with us and to ensure the family farms are able to maintain this operations. And so I would just ask you if you would be willing to do that as we move forward, and any comments that you'd like to make about that.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Absolutely. I want to work with each and every one of you to understand the complexities of really what's happening across the country as far as it relates to any of the H programs, but particularly H-2A. As a former member, I did serve on the H-2A subcommittee through agriculture, as I sat on that committee, to develop what is working and what's not. And the one-size-fits-all, as we know throughout Congress, isn't always the case. The department has already received almost 19,000 H-2A applications from the employers, which is a 9% increase in the workload that we're seeing. I know agriculture and this AWR, or the wage rate is a real concern for our farmers, ranchers, and producers. But what I do have to mention, of course, as you know, that this rule is subject to litigation, and it really precludes me. And I know that today, most of you will ask a lot of questions that while they're in that reality and in that realm, I will not be able to comment on that. But what I will say is I am sensitive to the concerns that we heard from the Biden administration, and I am committed to working with you and Secretary Rollins to solve this issue, because it has been brought up by not only each and every one of you, but almost every member of Congress that is concerned with the rural parts of America and how we're going to fill that workforce. So I am committed to working with you.
Thank you. In my opening remarks, I referred to the apprenticeship programs. And given the challenges that many employers face in finding well-qualified workers, many are turning to apprenticeships to build their supply line of skilled workers as they are in their particular businesses. The Alabama Office of Apprenticeship links talent with opportunity. Given how much I know you've heard about this important issue on your listening tour that you referred to, what can the Department of Labor do to support registered apprenticeship and all forms of work-based learning?
Yeah, I'm telling you, as we've been on this tour, I have visited over 8 states since I was sworn in, and we'll get to all 50 states before the end of the year. As was mentioned, there have been plenty of secretaries before me, despite whatever party, that they want to get around and understand the workforce, but it doesn't make any sense to me that we wouldn't do this on the front end, at the very beginning, to understand. But through the executive order of the president, 1 million apprentices is the goal for this country. We range between 680,000 to 700,000 at a time, so we have a ways to go. But I was just, see the investments, I was just in Ohio as well, and the Department of Labor is going to be focused on fulfilling that. And we know that every sector and every needs more, and it's not just in the traditional trades. We're seeing it across the board. So we will work with every industry to expand apprenticeship programs across the nation in order to fulfill the president's executive order for 1 million apprentices for that pipeline of the future workforce of America.
Thank you. And before my time expires, under the previous administration, the Office of Federal Contract Compliance uncertainty around the religious exemption for organizations, federal government. The rule allowed religious organizations to operate according to the religious beliefs while participating as a federal contractor. Without this important rule in place, what steps will the Department of Labor take to ensure that religious organizations receive fair treatment and protection in the federal contracting process?
Yeah, thank you. On that, as the Office of OFCCP is, again, under litigation, I would like to work with your office to fulfill that answer for you when it's available.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes Ranking Member DeLore for closing remarks.
Thank you very, very much. Let me just say one thing about paid leave. You may or may not know this because I have been here for 34 years, 32 on this committee. But in 1997, I introduced the Paid Family and Medical Leave bill. I actually worked for Senator Christopher Dodd, who introduced the first family and medical leave legislation, which took several years to pass, and finally passed by President Clinton. And we knew at the time that we couldn't get paid leave, so I've been on that mission since I arrived in this institution. I lead and author the Family Act. It guarantees 12 weeks of paid leave to all workers. The lack of having a paid leave program costs this economy about $22.5 billion a year. So I hope my colleagues would support that bill and that you can look at it, and I would hope to get your support for workers by supporting the Family Act, again, introduced in 1997. So I'm not talking about particular administrations. I just think we have to meet the moment and do what's right for American families across the board. And it's particularly helpful for women as well. Let me also make this statement to you, because I do believe you have very much, and you talked about, as I talked about being a daughter of a garment worker, you're the daughter of a teamster. So you have some idea of the history of what the labor movement has meant in the United States. And what it has done, as I said in my remarks, created the middle class in this country. And but if I were you, and I just mean this very, very sincerely, You head up the department that is central to what happens to working men and women in this country. If you can, and I don't know if this is possible for you, but your values with regard to this issue, and quite frankly, the values of others who have proposed a budget, and the disconnect between your values and the budget presented are really stark. And whatever way that you can find, I don't want to invade your space or how you navigate the direction of what you believe and what is occurring. I think you have to come to grips with that. Some of my colleagues here today would, when they smear regulations from labor laws, we need to remember what working conditions were like for U.S. workers before the enactment of our labor laws and the promulgation of the associated regulations and standards when we deal with OSHA or MSHA, and these efforts. And it was the first Secretary of Labor who was a woman, Frances Perkins, who was my role model, you know. She dealt with what happened in regulations after the Triangle Fire. It was massive loss of life, particularly of women. And I wrote a book in 2011, and the opening graph of that book, and I'm going to read it. It bears repeating that the reasons companies do not feel free to poison us, to sell us spoiled meat, lock our daughters up in ninth-floor sweatshops with no fire escapes, employ our underage sons in coal mines, force us to work 13-hour shifts without overtime or a break, or call in private armies to fire rifles at those of us who dare strike for higher wages is not because companies experienced a moment of zen and decided to evolve. No, they were forced into greater accountability and social concern by the legitimate actions of a democratic, that's a small d, a democratic government. In other words, if we depend on goodwill, we are all screwed. That is the opening paragraph of my book. You have the enormous responsibility of making sure that workers on the job are safe, in addition to their wages and a whole variety of other things, and to look at those who would want to dismiss regulations, speak about whatever kind of a market that they want, would allow us to go back to an era when workers, men and women, were abused in the workforce. And I don't believe that you want to do that. I also was very concerned when we were talking here today about you're in charge. But Elon Musk announced the deferred resignation program that has gutted your staff. But you won't share data on the impacts of the response to our letters or to our questions at this hearing. So I have to wonder, is Elon Musk in charge? Should we ask him the questions? Are the questions best directed to him? Or are you, the Secretary of Labor, in charge of the Department of Labor's staff? We did get a response. We wrote to you 2 months ago, the first, and I mentioned this to you over the phone. We wrote 2 months ago to you, myself, Senator Murray, Senator Baldwin, Congressman Scott, Senator Sanders, expressing concerns about the staffing reductions and office closures. We got a letter yesterday, a one-page letter, no information about the number of employees that have been fired, placed on administrative leave, or who took early retirement options. My colleague, Mr. Hoyer, asked about this, but you have to provide to this committee, and I hope you will commit to do this. You have to commit to doing this. A list of the programs the Department of Labor whose funding has been cut, frozen since January 20th, along with what was the criteria for gutting or freezing those funds. I'm all for cutting. I cut Job Corps programs in the past that were not working. Give us the criteria on which these programs were cut. We may agree with you, but we have a dialogue, agree or disagree on what's happened. We have no information. We're just told that there was a $2 trillion goal that had to be met, for saving, and therefore, let's cut without any thought about consequences of any of these cuts. You need to provide the committee with a number of employees at department by agency who received a reduction in force notification. And will you provide this committee the number of probationary employees by agency whose employment at the department was terminated? You have to provide the committee the number of employees at the department by agency who accepted early retirement offers. And we need to do that as quickly as possible if we are to address the appropriations for this department moving forward. Let me also mention to you the cuts in, we've talked about training programs, upskilling, workforce. Yes, and I told you about registered apprenticeships. I've been fighting for that for years, and I don't want unregistered apprenticeships. I think it's a boondoggle, and it's BS. It's registered, so we know what's happening, and that people have a job at the end of the line. But the 2026 budget proposal slashes job training programs by $3.6 billion. That's a 35% cut. That's opportunities for American workers. The president is asking to cut these funds while he administers disastrous policies that increase the cost of living for the middle class. We talked about WIOA. We appropriated 2025, and understand that 2025, the numbers are based on 2024. That's the budget. That's what, I didn't vote for it, but everyone on the other side of the aisle voted for a continuing resolution that said, let's continue the 2024 budget. And in that 2024 budget for 2025, the Congress appropriated $2.9 billion for WIOA grants to states and for job training programs. It's a violation of the law and of the Constitution to steal the appropriated funds from this committee or any other committee and move the dollars wherever you want to. No, it's against the law. And let me just say, and you don't have to answer these questions now, but I'm going to submit it. Are you planning to freeze and withhold congressionally appropriated funding for WIOA job state grants? Do you commit to following the law and fully obligating funding that Congress appropriated for WIOA job training state grants in fiscal year 2025? How many fewer participants would be served as a result of these proposed cuts? How would that impact the hiring needs of employers looking for skilled workers? Is there a role for publicly funded workforce development programs, or is your goal to only have workforce training by private companies? These are questions that we need to have answered. And I just say to you that, I'm sorry, OSHA closings. Offices closed. Louisiana, the only office in Louisiana for OSHA is closed. The only office in Oklahoma closed. In Arkansas, most of the office is in Illinois, over half in Georgia, the Florida Panhandle, the Great Lakes region. MSHA, deeper cuts. You restrict inspector travel. It's been pointed out with regard the mining incidences in the first 4 months of 2025. But that staff has been cut and offices closed. I do believe you fundamentally, you believe in workers' rights and safe workplaces. But I think you're in an environment where there may be others who don't share those values. And they're demonstrating it by the presentation of their budget. And we've heard about these cuts, not from you. You retweeted the from Doge, what the cuts. ILAB, Wanto, those grants cancellation were announced by Musk's Doge account and retreated, and you retreated that news. Madam Secretary, the American worker is relying on you and relying on us to make sure that we don't gut the worker programs that people have lived and died for in this country, and to move forward. It is an awesome responsibility. I wanted to be, and I was interviewed for the position of Secretary of Labor in the Obama administration. And when he asked me what I wanted to do, I said I wanted to be Frances Perkins. I want to protect the rights of American workers, men and women, protect children, guard against forced labor, make sure our trade agreements are worker-centered. I believe you have those concerns as well and care about those.
Brett. Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you for bringing up those important issues. I think we're all seeing that in our states, and so look forward to working with you to make sure that we get these things right. So, Madam Secretary, you have hit the ground running at the Department of Labor. You just kicked off your America Works tour, or America at Work. Yeah, so tell me about that. Obviously, you've been listening, learning, coast to coast. We certainly want to have you in Alabama, but I'd love to know, what are you hearing from people all across the country? What are their greatest concerns, and what things do you feel like you need to be taking action on?
Well, certainly the topic is the workforce when I'm on the ground, and part of the equation and how we're going to grow this economy. You know, the president has a mandate that growing the American economy is key, giving more power to the people, keeping more money in their pockets. So connecting the dots of the workforce to what the market demand is. So on the ground, the questions that I ask when I'm visiting with these American workers is, what are the barriers? How can we assist you? What's the workforce training? What gets in the way of you deciding to join the labor force? And those answers can be vast.
Yeah.
Obviously, it can be families, it can be childcare, it could be funding to get the skills that they need. So my job is to fill in those gaps. How can I assist in doing those? And so some of the things that we're hearing, not only from the companies, are we want more workers, men and women, to join the labor force. We want that participation rate to go up. And it's been holding steady, and we want it to go up.
Absolutely. So that's one of the things we talk about in our state, is how do we increase our labor participation rate? You touched on a number of things, and I think my colleagues have asked some questions about apprenticeships and that kind of thing. I want to hone in on one thing that really hasn't been discussed today that you just brought up, and that is childcare. Whether I am at the top of the state or the bottom of the state, or whether I'm at my largest manufacturer or, you know, a small business on Main Street, they say, you know, workforce is an issue, and they continually either lose people because of reliability or affordability of childcare, and or it is more challenging to recruit. When we started digging in on this, we saw that about 59% of stay-at-home and or non-working or part-time working parents say they want to re-engage in the workforce, but that affordability or accessibility of childcare is an impediment to that. Now, look, if you want and have the opportunity to stay home, I absolutely want that for you. But if you want to re-engage in the workforce and help with President Trump's vision of building back America, then I want to make sure that we remove those impediments. You know, a question for you, and certainly don't want to ask you to comment on any specifics, but you can say definitively that this is something you hear from workers, both large and small, and employers across the country.
Absolutely, and you know, in Congress, I heard it as well. I did a listening tour in Congress through agriculture. That's not a place that I would have thought I would have heard childcare for our farmers and ranchers.
So, and what we've seen is that between the ages of 0 and 5, a parent spends about 22% of their income on childcare. When you look at our economy across the board, it's $122 billion a year we lose to this reliability issue. I have a specific piece of legislation, a bipartisan piece of legislation, the Child Care Affordability or Availability and Affordability Act, that really puts parents back in the driver's seat and also encourages businesses, both large and small, to be a part of the solution. I think it's critically important that we empower parents, we empower hard-working Americans, and we help create a path for their American dream and for prosperity. So not asking you to comment on the specifics of my legislation, but knowing that we could be doing more to help these hard-working parents, I think you would say that's something that you agree with.
Absolutely, and whatever technical assistance I can give to any member of Congress as they move their own legislation through, I'm glad to do it and give you that data that you might need to work with your
Wonderful. Well, we'd love to continue to work with you as we build momentum. We've been building it in a bipartisan way. I think this is something Americans deserve better from us, and we're trying to produce that. Last year, I actually asked the Federal Reserve Chair about, you know, these common sense reforms that I'm talking to you about, and said if we were to do this, you know, would this actually help with our labor participation rate? And, you know, he said absolutely. So I'm glad that you agree with that as well. In my last few seconds, just want to talk a little bit about apprenticeship programs. I know that there has been some different information out there and wanted to give you an opportunity to speak to the fact that President Trump and obviously the department value these apprenticeship programs and continue to work to create pathways for them.
Well, thank you. I'll be brief. 1 million apprentices is what the president is asking in order to fulfill the need for those workers to grow this economy. We have anywhere between 680 to 700,000 apprentices now. We want more apprentices in the pipeline. So we're working very diligently through the Department of Labor to have that really lean into those registered apprenticeships and give the tools that are necessary for those companies to say, that's what we want to do. So for an example, International Association of Firefighters just launched their first apprenticeship program because we know we need our firefighters throughout the country. And so again, I think we've added about 83 apprentices since January, and so we're well on our way to that million.
Thank you so much. I look forward to working with you on all these issues.
Thank you, Senator.
Reed.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman, and welcome, Madam Secretary.
Thank you.
Thank you for the thoughtful call this week. I appreciate it very much. Like Senator Collins, I'm troubled by the proposed elimination of the Job Corps. She said it very passionately, and I support her 120%. As I discussed with you over the phone, we have a Job Corps Center in Exeter, Rhode Island, and it's not only critical to these young men and women to develop their talents and be productive members of our society, but also it's a key aspect of our submarine production with their relationships to Electric Boat at Quonset Point, Rhode Island. If we don't have these trained and skilled workers, we will fall behind further and further in terms of submarine production, which will be detrimental is an understatement to our national security. And again, I think it's something that we have to seriously reconsider, this reduction. What I've heard already is that you've ceased background checks on new students, so they cannot enroll new students going forward at this point.
Yeah, there is a pause.
So that pause is really preventing young people from qualifying to go and start the next year of school. And
yeah, as we continue to review, there is a pause because, again, the transparency report, what we're seeing in costs, no final decision has been made, and that's why I'm so committed to working with each and every one of you and understanding that. And I know through our conversation on the phone, Senator, in your respective state, how important this was for you. And I think we talked a little bit about the numbers. You have the one Job Corps Center, Exeter, that you mentioned, that's specific and intentional in working with the companies. And while there's a difference in certain Job Corps centers, I know that the cost per enrollee there is $65,000 and cost per graduate is about $191,000. What we also know, as I mentioned, kind of as a whole, the overall graduation rate is about 38%. And so, again, most of the Job Corps graduates, if they come out, are making just under $17,000 a year. So my goal is to not forget this population and work with you all on how we transition to a pre-apprenticeship. And the president's executive order on 1 million apprentices throughout the country is going to be a directive to me and the Department of Labor to make sure that we are addressing that across the board.
well, let's go to that transparency report you refer to consistently. All these numbers are based upon data from really the heart of the COVID epidemic, in which, because of COVID, 34% enrollment was at 34%. Today, enrollment is at 75%. And if you ran those numbers today, the course per student would go down dramatically. So your argument that this is just a waste and too expensive is a direct result, a calculated result of picking the most favorable point you could to reinforce an argument I would suspect the administration had before you even got there, which is let's get rid of this program and find some numbers to justify it.
That's not a true statement. That's not a true statement.
What year is it? Are these numbers coming from?
Well, they are pre-COVID, but the same amount of dollars were spent. despite how many enrollees were there. So it's more than just the one-legged part of the stool of the cost. The transparency report also let us understand that there are other flaws in the program. And through that transparency report, we saw that there are many of these students who were in harm's way, whether through rape, murder, incident reports that have come out. So I have to look at the whole picture, but I can tell you this. I want to care about the apprenticeship side of this. So it's not a forgotten on this population. I will work with you specifically in your state to address those students.
Let's look at the transparency report another way. It appears to count students, for example, who go into military service or further education as having zero earnings. As a result, you can make the argument that after all this money is spent, these young people don't get jobs worthwhile, et cetera. This is a calculated, not transparent, but deceptive report, in my view. So I would hope you would recognize that and review it. The other aspect I think we have to share straight is this block grant approach to training. I've been serving here for a while. The block grant is a deliberate approach that's been taken by many administrations to gradually end programs. Because all you do is the next year, if inflation is 3%, the block grant goes up 1%. And after about 5 or so years, states begin to say, we're not getting enough money to do this, why should we put our money in? Further complicating the block grant approach is that if you look at the totality of the Trump budget, the question in states, your state, West Virginia, how are we going to make up the cuts to Medicaid that will basically undermine our entire healthcare system? How are we going to make up the cuts to elementary and secondary education? For example, in my state of Rhode Island, $34 million from Medicaid goes into taking care of young students there. Does the state just say, well, we can't afford that anymore, et cetera? So what you're going to see in reality is that this block grant will rapidly deteriorate to nothing. And two, states will not have the ability, yet partnership, because given the choice of saving a healthcare system or saving a school system, I would suspect they would choose that over some of this training. So again, this approach seems to me to be entirely unsubstantiated by real analysis and something that's going to cause more problems. And it's not going to deliver training to young people. So, and, you know, the other thing is, clever remarks are the downfall of people. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, for being here today. I represent Mississippi, and our state is experiencing strong economic momentum with record-breaking capital investment and job creation. However, our labor force participation rates remains one of the lowest in the nation. We face challenges such as being predominantly rural, high poverty rates, and several other barriers as well. This complicates reliable data collection, especially when it's not sourced from trusted state-level partners. We've also seen growing concerns with studies from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, particularly as surveys response rates do continue to decline. Do you believe states should play a larger role in collecting labor market data to ensure more accurate information to support policymaking to help out-of-work Americans get jobs?
Well, thank you for the question, and it's so nice to have visited with you, and thank you for being here today. As far Bureau of Labor Statistics is independent of the Department of Labor and will continue to be. That's an important, the data is important, but it is independent of the Department of Labor, and I can't put my thumb on the scale for the collection of the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Whether the state would do a more accurate job or, let's see, I understand that. One of the things that we're concerned about is human trafficking.
Absolutely.
And of course, it's just an unspeakable atrocity. This continues to plague our nation at deeply alarming rates. Labor trafficking, a form of exploitation that forces individuals to work through coercion, fraud, or by force. It's particularly troubling among this crisis. It's happening in every state, and it's something we must confront head-on. Can you elaborate on the department's approach to combating labor exploitation and human trafficking, especially as it pertains to your collaboration with law enforcement?
Yeah, thank you again for that. Combating, the exploitation of any child should be not tolerated by anyone, any company, any business, anyone in the federal government. So that is a number one goal for the Department of Labor, is to combat child labor, child trafficking, human trafficking. And so working with our law enforcement teams, is essential to combating that. But at the Department of Labor, our goal is to fully enforce the law and make sure that we are using the full enforcement capability of the Department of Labor to crack down if someone is knowingly breaking that law, and we will double down to do that.
And how are staff at the department being provided with training and support to enhance the identification of potential trafficking situations? What's your training program like?
Well, it's essential through the Department of Labor to make sure that we have the highest skilled employees, to make sure that we can work with our state partners and our businesses throughout the country so that we can identify where that is happening, and we can have that enforcement agency make sure that we're reaching out and through the Inspector General's office as well as our enforcement offices to go in and be able to understand what the possibility or the alleged, if it's child labor, if it's child trafficking, that we can get the full picture in order that they understand that we have to have that in the full enforcement of the law.
So you're comfortable with the training practices you have in place now?
Well, it's essential that we make sure that the enforcement capabilities of the Department of Labor is unique to this agency, that we have the full enforcement through our Inspector Generals and our agents on the ground.
Is there anything this committee can do to assist you or your agency in that?
Well, I would certainly like to have a more comprehensive conversation, maybe specifics in your respective states about what you need from the Department of Labor, and work together.
Great. Thank you very much. And I also, as with Senator Collins, I'm concerned about the Job Corps Center's locations in Mississippi closing. And, hopefully we will have something to replace that, because it is a great concern. They're all over the state. Gulfport, Batesville, Crystal Springs is close to me, and it is very valuable to Mississippi. And I would like to just associate myself with Senator Collins's comments. And now we go to Senator.
Thank the gentleman. Now I recognize the gentlelady from Minnesota for 5 minutes of questioning, Ms. Omar.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, for being here with us and watching the hearing earlier. I learned that you're also a former union member.
My father was a Teamster.
Yes. Okay. All right. I'm a former AFSCME member. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the child labor enforcement. In 2 appropriations hearings last month, you expressed a firm commitment to fighting illegal child labor. At the same time, your agency has decimated ILAP, including its work to prevent child labor. Your budget proposal will weaken a historically under-resourced wage and hour division. The nominee to be your solicitor of labor wrote a chapter in Project 2025, which literally calls for the rolling back of child labor laws. Madam Secretary, can you assure this committee that you will not propose any rollbacks of child labor rules that prevent children from being employed in hazardous occupations?
I commit to fighting against all child labor exploitation. Absolutely, in this country, we do not want to exploit our children. Consistent with putting the American worker first, the budget does streamline ILAB, that is one of the agency departments that protect the American worker and protect against child labor violations. The budget provides for about $70 million to ILAB, including $38 million in grant funding, while restoring ILAB's emphasis on putting the American worker first.
So that's a long way of you saying yes?
I will work absolutely to combat all child labor.
Wonderful. Many workers across the country will feel the impacts of your staffing and funding cuts to WHD and OSHA. As of May 2025, WHD employees just 611 investigators nationwide. This is the lowest number since at least 1973, even though there are nearly 10 times as many workers and businesses for them to cover. Your budget proposal cutting the office by $25 million, with staffing projected to fall. Your budget would also cut OSHA inspectors by over 12%, even though currently it will take 185 years to inspect every workplace just once. Madam Secretary, what is the plan to keep workers safe when you're slashing enforcement?
Yeah, no, thank you again. Again, one of the overall core missions is to protect the American worker, and that includes in the wage and hour division as well. And while we are streamlining and doing some cost saving for the American taxpayer, we will always be in compliance with our statutory requirements.
Well, that doesn't, Madam Secretary, if I can just interrupt for 1 second. At one point, DOGE was set to close 20 WHD field offices and 11 OSHA offices. If this is happening, how will this protect workers?
So the offices that we have been, that were originally proposed through GSA, we have worked with to bring them online. I don't think that that is a good use of the compliance issue that we have to protect the American worker. And through the DRP, none of our essential workers, either through wage and hour, through OSHA, through MSHA, were able to take those because we know we need those investigators on the ground to protect the American worker, and I advocated for that.
Yeah, but having fewer investigators and inspectors will not protect workers from wage theft, misclassification, and dangerous working conditions. So how are you going to operate with less, even though we didn't even have enough to begin with?
Well, it depends on what the priorities are from the past administration, but in this
Are inspections not priorities?
They are priorities to protect the
But with
American
less
worker.
inspectors, you can't do investigations.
What we don't want to do is weaponize the use of those funding dollars against.
How is there weaponization if it's going to take you 187 years to complete inspections and you are cutting the inspectors that are supposed to do those inspections? The math is not mathing.
Well, statutorily, we will protect the American worker. We did not have any of our investigators currently. We're not able to take the DRP in order so that they can be assigned to the job that they are required to do.
So are you saying that you're going to hire more investigators to do inspections?
What I'm saying is we did not allow our statutorily mandated offices that we need essential workers like our investigators through wage and hour, through MSHA, and through OSHA to take the DRP because they are essential to protecting the American worker in these industries. We can still cost save and do the job that we need to do.
So American workers can expect that you will expedite investigations to make sure that we are assuring their safety.
American workers can expect that the Department of Labor will protect the American worker, as that is a core mission of the Department of Labor.
I hope you keep that promise. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman for his excellent example of efficient questioning and timekeeping. And now I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Desaulniers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I have a question for my last 5 seconds, so I'll save that. Madam Secretary, thank you so much for reaching out. I enjoyed our conversation yesterday. It was nice to find out that we were both fellow Teamsters, former Teamsters, and small business owners. 2 subjects that we talked about, 3 actually yesterday that I hope you remember. First, that work we're doing for multiple sessions now on the Health, Employment, Labor, and Pension Subcommittee, which I'm the ranking member with Mr. Allen, to deal with abuses in employer-based health insurance. Half of the American population roughly has that health insurance, and through multiple hearings and multiple sessions, we've seen that some providers are denying legally required claims from doctors and physicians that historically have been accepted without a lot of remedy unless the Department of Labor oversees the laws. So look forward to working with you in a bipartisan way to help employers and employees get what they paid for contractually. And then behavioral health, which is a passion of mine, having been a survivor of family suicide and addiction, and all the remarkable treatments in my lifetime we've been able to come up with help people like my dad get the treatment they deserve to live full lives. And he was a treatment counselor. He had a master's degree when he took his life. So in regards to that, I'm discouraged by some of the proposals from the department and the administration. Last month, the administration announced that the Department of Labor will no longer enforce the 2024 mental health parity final rule, which prevents health insurance policies from imposing stricter limitations on mental health and substance abuse disorder benefits than those on medical benefits. The President's 2026 budget for DOL cuts Employee Benefit Security Administration, EBSA, funding while allowing bipartisan funding from the No Surprises Act to expire. In addition, the DOL's budget, EBSA would have just 640 full-time employees to oversee $14 trillion of plan assets held by 4 million employee benefit plans covering over 150 million Americans. This is down from 1,000 staff in 2012, when the agency's mission was much smaller than it is today. So, Madam Secretary, have you done an analysis of what these cuts will do to the delivery of services to these Americans, almost half the population, that are legally to benefit from these under bipartisan law?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman, and again for the conversation. While this is the preliminary budget of the President, I will be looking to work with Congress, and ultimately Congress will determine the appropriations and what the final budget is. We want to make sure that we are, again, saving the American taxpayers dollars that are used efficiently, and that we modernize some of the current laws. Again, a lot of the executive orders, and I think the one that you mentioned, Executive Order 14219, in regards to rolling back rules that impose undue burdens without clear statutory backing. So I will work with Congress statutorily. If that is something they want to work with, then I will gladly work with your office and many others on the technical assistance for that. But other than that, understanding that we want to make sure that we are saving the American taxpayers and no undue burdens are done, and addressing the issues that you are concerned about and many others are as well.
And it's important to the economy and to the employer. Having their valued employees be able to get back to work, whether it's a medical situation or behavioral health one, benefits everybody, particularly the economy. And obviously, foremost is the employee and their families.
Well, again, the Department of Labor's goal is to have a higher labor participation workforce, and oftentimes there are incidences where people leave the workforce, and we want them to come back. Right. We want to assure that they are able to do so, and we'll do that in compliance of the department.
Well, and I know you know that, as I do, as a small business employer. I'd like to discuss another area. I'm about to introduce a bill to ensure that the principle of behavioral health parity extends not just to health insurance, but also disability insurance. The experts on ERISA Advisory Council made this recommendation. It's been supported by a number of companies, including Sun Life, a leading provider of disability insurance. Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a statement from Sun Life in support of extending parity into disability benefits.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, will you commit to working with me and my colleagues on the committee to implement the ERISA Advisory Council's recommendation to improve disability insurance for people with behavioral health conditions?
Absolutely. I will work with your office.
Darn, that was my 5-second question, and you answered it succinctly. I yield back by 1 second.
I thank you for your excellent example. The gentlelady's time has expired, and now recognize the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Onder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member. Thank you for appearing before the committee today.
Thank you.
Congratulations. ERISA establishes a broad preemption of state laws relating to employer-sponsored health plans, with the exception that states retain the ability to regulate insurance. States may regulate fully insured group health plans, but self-insured plans are not regulated as insurance under state laws because the plan assumes the risk and the liability of the plan. The plan then often will the employer will often then buy reinsurance to protect from excessive claims exposure. ERISA preemption allows self-funded plans a uniform set of benefits across state lines. It allows employers to offer coverage at a more reasonable cost, lower premiums, increased cost sharing. Some states have passed laws that I believe attack this paradigm of ERISA and of self-insured plans. whether it be recent state laws to regulate pharmacy benefit managers or laws to restrict reinsurance. Will the Department of Labor, under your leadership, remain committed to the traditional ERISA self-insurance system and ERISA preemption that has provided health insurance for so many employers and employees through this country?
Well, it's certainly important, and thank you for visiting with me as we, again, didn't get to work together. But it's important and incumbent upon the agency and ERISA to work with you and many other offices in order to protect the American worker as they move through this process in their plans together. So I am committed to working with your office on any specifics that you need from me to do so, but it is in compliance with what we are doing now under ERISA, and we will commit to stay that way.
Right, and it seems that there are some who believe that all health insurance should be government health insurance, and of course, I think many of us in this room today have most of our lives been covered by employer-provided self-insured plans. So I think that's an important part of our healthcare system that we need to protect.
Yeah, one of the things that is often talked about in this committee is employee health care plans and offering the best plans available, and that whether that's through, again, associated health plans, taking a look into PBMs, as you mentioned. I know that was a line of questioning that Dr. Fox did often in this last cycle. And the goal of the administration is to lower the cost of health care and make sure that we're providing that benefit to the employees. So working with private businesses and public, we want to make sure that we're offering the best health care plans. And so that's your job, and it is my job to then comply with that law.
No, I can commend you for that statement. Ensuring quality health care and, of course, lowering the cost of health care, because the United States, of course, spends more than any other industrialized country for health care, and yet we don't always achieve the best outcomes, a major theme of this administration.
Absolutely.
And likewise, and I think a key to that is to provide more, not fewer options. Another option would be short-term limited duration health insurance. In April of 2023, the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Treasury published final rules that on this issue. Essentially, the Trump administration had allowed short-term health plans to go for 12 months and then be renewable up to 3 years. The Biden administration reverted to the old Obama era policy of 3 months with only 1 month of renewal. Again, short-term health plans obviously are not for everyone in every situation, but they do offer flexible coverage in cases, for instance, due to waiting periods, Medicaid determinations, or when an individual cannot afford a plan on the ACA marketplace, which are often very expensive. Likewise, I believe this is another option. Your thoughts?
Yeah, so again, I think it kind of goes back to what I was just saying about the flexibility and modernization of allowing businesses to be able to provide for their employees and have that flexibility of what the offering can be. Again, as we go through rulemaking, the specifics is where I'll look to Congress and or our stakeholders to determine, and as we move through that process, then be able to make a final determination on that rulemaking. But I can't really comment it as it is in a rulemaking. So
thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman.
Gentleman.
Thank you, Congressman.
And I recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Madam Secretary, for your presence here today.
Of course.
And, well, listen, we want to thank you also for your leadership that you're bringing to the administration. In fact, the Trump administration's pro-worker and pro-business policies are already delivering benefits across the country. And in my home state of North Carolina, just this week, Amazon made an announcement that they're making a $10 billion investment in Richmond County, which is right in the heart of my district, that will lead to thousands of construction jobs and as many as 500 skilled jobs when their data center is complete. And as you know, getting the jobs is only half the battle. We have to make sure workforce is ready to be hired when the dust settles. And I agree that apprenticeships are a key way to get Americans in jobs, and was pleased to read in your testimony about the ways to expand opportunities to achieve President Trump's goal of over 1 million new active apprentices across the country. So I guess my question is, does the Department of Labor have plans to examine the registered apprenticeship program to look for any ways to reduce the bureaucracy that involve industry or provide multiple pathways for quality programs to emerge?
Well, again, thank you for that, you addressing the apprenticeship program, and it's somewhat of its entirety because, you know, oftentimes we say something and then we have to implement it. It is at the direction of the President that we do have 1 million apprentices in this pipeline to grow this economy, to assist those businesses who are onshoring or investing, and as you mentioned, investing in your home state. They're expecting that workforce to be right there. It is my responsibility to work with private businesses and the public sector as well to develop that apprenticeship program to 1 million. As I've toured throughout the country, we're seeing, again, I mentioned 83,000 since the President has been online. And since January 20th. One of the new apprenticeship programs that was just developed was with the International Association of Firefighters. It's something that hasn't been done before. And so we're assisting them in compliance and how to do that, streamlining the actual mitigation of the systems at Department of Labor so people want to engage. They want to register their apprentices. We're seeing that the public-private sector work together. We're seeing that on our community college campuses. We're seeing it at Centers of Excellence, where private companies are investing in that workforce and sponsoring them so that they have that secured pipeline for investments like in your home state. So when we pair those two together, I could almost guarantee, and mark my words, Chairman, I would like to get over 1 million apprentices in this first year.
Awesome. Can you anticipate any help you might need from Congress in order to achieve that goal?
Absolutely. I believe every time Congress comes up with good bipartisan policy, it helps all of our agencies to further develop the workforce. It is the goal of this administration to streamline and modernize some of the federal bureaucracy and the red tape and the systems that have been in place for far too long. As a former mayor, I often used to think if we could just alleviate some of the red tape without harming the American worker, I think that that is going to be key. It is really an honor to kind of take a holistic approach to how do we protect the American worker and how do we protect the American business. And one of the reasons that the President chose me was to bring those two to the table together so that we can grow the economy as a whole, make the pie a little bit bigger, and live the American dream again. And that's what we're doing every single day.
Excellent.
So I look to Congress for good policy that I can enforce in order to grow the workforce.
Excellent. Well, in my last minute or so, let me ask this, and it really ties in with what Congressman Wilson had talked about earlier. The Biden-Harris Department of Labor's H-2A worker protection rule has been preliminarily enjoined by 3 separate district court decisions finding likely cause for unlawfulness in multiple aspects of this expansive rulemaking. And rather than halt implementation of the rule until these court proceedings run their course, DOL continues to implement a confusing patchwork of regulations. The rule should, at the very least, be halted or, more appropriately, rolled back completely. And I guess I'm going to ask, is DOL reviewing this rule, and what are your plans to provide this certainty? In my district, I have a lot of ranchers, a lot of farmers that are very interested in this, and they love the H-2A program.
That's right.
And we want to make sure they are concerned about the rising cost, obviously.
Yeah. Every time, again, that there is policy, we want to make sure it's workable and that it works for the American people. It is my obligation to review all rulemaking and regulation and then work with Congress to determine the best outcome of that policy and then enforce the law. And I will continue to work with our stakeholders in our respective states, including our H-2A visa users, to do so.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Secretary. Mr. Chairman, I yield back my time.
Thank you, Congress.
I thank the gentleman. Pursuant to Committee Rule 8C, all members who wish to insert written statements into the record may do so by submitting them to the committee clerk electronically in Microsoft Word format by 5 p.m. 14 days after this hearing. And without objection, the hearing record will remain open for 14 days to allow such statements and other extraneous material noted during the hearing to be submitted for the official hearing record. I'll now turn to the introduction of today's witness, the Honorable Lori M. Chavez-DeRemer, Secretary of the U.S. Department of Labor. Madam Secretary, we thank you for being here today. We thank you for reaching out to our committees and committee members on both sides of the aisle. As you are aware, it's your responsibility to provide accurate information to the committee. Pursuant to committee rules, I would ask that you limit your oral presentation to a 5-minute summary of your written statement before questioning. Madam Secretary, you're welcome, and you are recognized for your testimony.
Chairman Walberg, Ranking Member Scott, and members of the committee, thank you for the invitation to testify today. It's an honor to appear before the committee as the 30th Secretary of Labor to share the important work this administration is doing at the department and discuss the President's fiscal year 2026 budget request. My role as Secretary is to ensure the American worker is at the center of our economic strategy. These workers have railed behind President Trump and given him a clear mandate. It is my job to guarantee that they are not just heard, but respected and prioritized at every level of government. From the moment I was sworn in on March 11th, I promised to put American workers first, and that mission has guided me from the very beginning. Through the common sense reforms, we will focus the Department of Labor on that same purpose, saving taxpayer resources while safeguarding protections that are critical to the health and well-being of our workforce, like enforcement efforts, inspectors, and investigators. Additionally, I'm committed to having an open-door policy with every worker. As their liaison and advocate, I am dedicated to painting an accurate picture of laborers' needs and concerns. I launched my listening tour, America at Work, to hear directly from the men and women who are living this day in and day out. From a training facility demonstration with the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers in Pennsylvania, to a day spent with apprentices learning to become aviation mechanics in Nevada, I am experiencing and relaying the everyday challenges and triumphs of America at work. These insights are imperative to shaping federal labor policies and practices. To help employers and stakeholders better understand existing labor laws and provide them with much-needed transparency, the Department of Labor launched our opinion letter program this week across 5 of our enforcement agencies. This key tool puts practical guidance into the hands of the public while improving compliance and giving workers and employers peace of mind. Putting American workers and businesses first is a priority I share with President Trump, and he's delivering with nearly $10 trillion in private investments and almost 500,000 new jobs. To further stimulate our economic comeback, the Trump administration is overhauling the waste and abuse that has characterized the federal government's use of tax dollars for decades. The Labor Department is looking at ways to streamline federal programs and evaluate how taxpayer dollars are spent. In line with this approach, the budget proposes to eliminate ineffective training interventions, and that does include the Job Corps program. Our recently released Job Corps Transparency Report showed that in 2023 alone, more than 14,000 serious incidents were reported at the Job Corps centers, including cases of sexual assault, physical violence, and drug use. This program is failing to deliver safe and successful outcomes our young people deserve. At the same time, it costs an average of almost $20,000 more per year for a student to attend Job Corps than it does for a student to attend Harvard. Our nation's vulnerable young adults deserve better, and I am committed with all of you to achieving the safest and most successful outcomes possible. Consistent with these efforts, the President's fiscal year 2026 budget gives states the flexibility to spend workforce dollars in the way that makes the most sense for them. By consolidating siloed federal job programs into single Make America Skilled Again grants, states and localities will be able to spend more time and money delivering high-quality training for their workers. Pursuant to 2 critical executive orders, my department is hard at work collaborating with the Department of Commerce and Education to unlock the potential of the American worker. We are looking to strengthen registered apprenticeships, modernize workforce development programs, and invest in opportunities that upskill workers to meet current labor market demands. Now, before I take your questions, I do want to address at the outset, there are likely questions that will cover issues subject to litigation, as the ranking member mentioned. and I will not be able to provide the detailed responses that you are looking for in this setting. I understand you all want answers, and I'll make the same promise to you that I made to the chairman on our call. Even if I can't provide the details today, I remain committed to working with you on the issues that impact your constituents. I believe, as all of you do, that we must work together to foster an economy that ensures every American can thrive with good pay, safe working conditions, and a secure retirement. It is my honor to work on behalf of President Trump as we bring jobs back to the United States and put the American worker first again. I look forward to working with Congress on these goals and continuing this important discussion today. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. I recognize the gentleman from New York. Mr. Mannion, for your 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary, Madam Secretary, for joining us today, and appreciate the opportunity to hear from you about the changes occurring at the Department of Labor, as well as your budget request of fiscal year 26. Under this administration, the country, meaning many of our small business owners and our workers, have faced significant economic uncertainty, and as a result, labor market fluctuations, chaotic trade policy, mass layoffs, anti-union efforts, and abrupt terminations of important federal-funded programs have negatively impacted nearly all communities and industries. In your budget request, if enacted by Congress, could add to this economic distress. What is troubling is the proposal to consolidate 11 separate workforce programs into a single block grant. These long-standing bipartisan programs are critical for uplifting many groups within my district. We have the highest concentration of childhood poverty in the city of Syracuse and the highest concentration of African American poverty as well. Lumping the programs together and handing the funding over with seemingly minimal targeting or accountability mechanisms puts all of these populations at risk of being overlooked and underserved. That said, I do want to acknowledge one component of the budget that I do support and believe we can work together on, and that's registered apprenticeship programs. In my work in the New York State Legislature, I more than doubled funding for a program under the Manufacturers Alliance of Central New York, and what we've seen is the transformations of people's lives as a result of that program. So these programs do offer pathways into high-quality jobs, particularly for individuals without a four-year degree. So, Madam Secretary, your budget would require that 10% of the new block grant that you're proposing would go towards apprenticeships. That would amount to a 4% increase over the existing funding. And as you've mentioned, this administration has stated a goal of 1 million active apprentices, which would be an increase of 50% over that number. So I appreciate and agree with you regarding this bold goal, but if we're going to increase funding by 4%, how are we going to increase the apprenticeship programs by 50%?
Well, thank you, Congressman, and I know we don't know each other well, and I'm sorry we didn't get to work together, but I look forward to working with you through this process on the apprenticeship program. It is going to take hard work and investment into our private sector and public sector to grow the apprenticeship program. It is my responsibility, again, to address that workforce development so that everybody can live the American dream. We know that the skilled workforce of today is different than it was from, let's just say, even 5 to 10 years ago. The trajectory is changing rapidly. The modernization of the skilled workforce is changing, and it is inclusive of many things such as AI as well. So it is my responsibility to assist our market demands in addressing that. I've seen that in the private sector with car companies. I've seen it with our community colleges wanting to answer the call of what is on the ground they're asking for. With your assistance, I look forward to prioritizing the budget to address that. On the other question that you asked about, the Make America Skilled Again block grant. Through the patchwork of different states, oftentimes the complexity and the mitigation of getting that funding can be somewhat difficult. This administration, through the budget process goal, is to combine a lot of those grants without duplication in order to save on the duplication of the processes. But that shouldn't limit and won't limit the investment that we have in the actual workforce. It is still up to Congress to determine if that is what they want. This is a preliminary budget.
I think it is a more flexible one that we can lean on and work with our respective state partners so that they can tell me how they want to spend that funding, as if it's not New York or Oregon or Indiana or anywhere else. That is the goal. But it will be up to Congress to determine if that's where they want those appropriated dollars to come from. And I would work with your office in assisting you as well.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. You mentioned our community colleges. We have a fantastic university system in New York State, and we have the largest private investment in the history of this country with Micron coming in, semiconductor chip manufacturing. That was the result of the CHIPS and Science program, as well as a state piece of legislation called Green Chips. And as I look over your shoulder, I'm going to hit 5 seconds right on the dot. Strengthening Community Colleges program is one of those proposed eliminations. How are we going to ensure that our community colleges can pivot to the extent that they've already done to make sure we have these stack credentialing programs and other advanced manufacturing programs?
Well, I'm glad to answer that in more detail. I know that our time is up, but I will submit that answer for you, and I will work with the community college and just do that quarter turn, because I think it's just going to take just enough of that in order to address those issues. I've worked with community colleges and trade schools for years as a former mayor, and I will continue to do so as the Secretary and answer that question for you.
I thank the Secretary. Gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm amazed, I just thank God we got people from the business world in this government now, because if you're not innovating and you're not automating, you're out of business. And it's this government for too long has ignored the amazing technology that is available today to do the very things that we're talking about doing and actually do a much better job. I've seen it in the business world, and it's time for the government to wake up, and the taxpayers would appreciate it too. This Congress, I'm honored to chair, that Chair Wahlberg asked me to serve as chairman of the HELP Committee, Health, Employment, Labor, and Pension Subcommittee, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. With that being said, Madam Secretary, again, thank you for your efforts in modernizing the Department of Labor, but in recent years, we've seen a concerning rise in the number of working Americans relying on government health care programs like Medicare and Medicaid. One of my top priorities, and Chairman Wahlberg had brought this up as well, is to expand access to affordable private health coverage for small business, self-employed individuals, and that's why I am proud to co-sponsor Chairman Wahlberg's Association Health Plan bill. I have met with Fortune 50 companies, Fortune 500 companies. They self-insure and have reinsurance, and they are reducing cost of health care and providing amazing health care to their employees. I also believe that extending the same ERISA waivers currently available to union and faith-based health plans to association health plans could empower these groups with greater bargaining power, ultimately driving down insurance costs for their members. Would your department be open to exploring ways to allow association health plans similar flexibility and waivers currently afforded to union and faith-based plans under ERISA?
Yeah, thank you again for the question and the conversation about this, and I'll look to Congress. Again, from the Department of Labor's perspective, it is my responsibility and my job to work with Congress on these technical issues and assist you in understanding that. But it is the goal of this administration to lower health care costs, to understand that we want to offer the best programs and the best plans for our American workers. So yes, I'm committed to working with you and your office on this piece of legislation.
Thank you. One of my biggest priorities as subcommittee chair is ensuring that Americans' hard-earned retirement savings should never be jeopardized by politically motivated mismanagement. The Biden-Harris administration revoked the protective Trump administration rules that prohibited investing retirement plan assets and voting proxies held by plans for the purpose of impacting and advancing woke policies at the expense of participant retirement savings. The Biden-Harris administration also issued replacement rules that allow and even encourage fiduciaries to use other people's retirement savings for woke agendas. Can you explain the importance of ensuring investment fiduciaries invest exclusively for the purpose of providing benefits and defraying reasonable expenses under retirement plans?
Yeah, thank you. I think you're referring to ESG,
Yes.
And that has been under this administration where we want to make sure that the fiduciaries are working with their investors for the best outcome and the risk-mitigated investments. And so the Department of Labor will Notway will remain neutral on this, and we just issued as well that we want fiduciaries to work with their investors and not weigh in on any woke
Good. Good.
policies for certainly, and
Good.
followed that executive order.
And I recently introduced the Protecting Prudent Investment and Retirement and Savings Act. This legislation seeks to codify that those who manage Americans' retirement savings under the Employment Retirement Income Security Act, or ERISA, must prioritize maximizing returns for secure retirement rather than political or social impact using risky ESG investors, as you mentioned. The Biden-Harris administration, congressional Democrats, and states, including California, have consistently demonstrated their hostility to independent contractors who choose to earn income through apps like Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash. What kinds of policies do you support to assist workers who want to earn a living or some extra money by working as independent contractors?
Yeah, thank you. It is one of the industries that has expanded very rapidly, the gig economy, the platform economy. This administration recognizes how important it is for workers to have that flexibility to build the businesses for themselves. The rule that you reference is under the Biden administration is currently under litigation, so I am limited in what I can say, but publicly what I can say is that it's consistent that we will offer the guidance that's necessary in clarifying that 2024 rule. And we're also offering the opinion letter program that I mentioned on the onset in order to guide oftentimes private sector businesses in how the Department of Labor is looking at that.
Great. I'm out of time, but thank you for your common sense approach to solving these issues, and I yield back, Mr.
I thank the
Chairman.
gentleman, and now I now recognize the gentleman from Connecticut, Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I want to join my colleagues in welcoming the Secretary back to her committee. And again, I appreciate the phone call the other day where we had a chance to compare notes on a number of issues. In particular, and you mentioned this in your opening remarks, your reference to using the registered apprenticeship program as the framework for expanding and growing apprentices is welcome. Message in terms of the Fitzgerald Act, which actually my predecessor in the 1930s, William Fitzgerald, was the sponsor of that law and has done great things all across the country and is the right framework in terms of setting national standards so that all across the country, people who see those certificates know that there's real quality behind that certificate. I wanted to focus for a second on one of the issues that is part of your mission, which again, Mr. Scott mentioned, is to guarantee the welfare of American workers, which is the OSHA. Your predecessor in the Trump administration, Secretary Acosta, actually commenced a rulemaking process for a workplace violence prevention standard in healthcare and social workers, which has still been sort of chugging along within the department. Again, this is a measure that is, in my opinion, to address an emergency, which is the incredible rates of violence that nurses, EMTs, emergency room physicians are facing at a frightening pace and rate over the years. This committee has done a lot of work in terms of the data collection that validates and demonstrates how serious this problem is. And the rule that is before your department right now is something which, again, we enacted twice in prior Congresses on a bipartisan basis, and there's a bill that myself and Mr. Bacon have introduced as well. But basically, it would set up a prevention system that is actually tried and true in some parts of the country, which provides training for medical staff in terms of how to de-escalate situations, basically identifying high-risk patients, whether in a psych hospital or an emergency room, which is where, again, the highest intensity of really serious injuries take place, and give, again, tools to people, whether it's panic buttons, systems of communication in terms of flagging high-risk patients that are there. And again, I want to just emphasize, Madam Secretary, this is a life and death situation. We have had incidents reported in from all over the country of people who've lost their lives because of inadequate safeguards that were out there. One of them is a 63-year-old home health nurse from Eastern Connecticut who was stabbed to death a couple of years ago on a home health visit. High-risk patient, actually was on a sex offender list and walked into that house completely sort of unequipped to sort of address what, again, ended her life. And, you know, the tragedy still resonates today. So, again, it's gone through the small business SBREFA panel during the last administration. Again, the next steps are still ahead. And I really would ask your commitment to really making sure that the 15 million healthcare workers that are a huge part of America's workforce are going to see real action in your department in terms of advancing this rule.
Well, thank you, Congressman, and thank you again for the conversation on the phone. Just in a few seconds, I want to address the apprenticeships that you mentioned.
Yeah, I actually would like you to talk really about the OSHA. We agree on the apprenticeships. No issue there.
I will. My goal is 1 million apprentices in order to enhance
fine.
that. We are taking a look at all of the rulemaking because I think it's key. I can speak to it from former congressman. That is one of the issues that I heard on the ground oftentimes was workplace safety. And now as the Secretary of Labor and understanding that is one of the core missions is to protect our workforce. No worker should ever have to determine whether or not they're going to go home safe at the end of the day. That is one of the core missions. It'll be something that I always look at. So in the promulgation of rulemaking, while I cannot discuss it while it's in rulemaking, it is key
really, it's just
for
a
the
commitment to
Department of
move
Labor
forward. I'm not asking for details. Before my 20 seconds, I just want to make sure you know,
Thank you.
over 30 professional organizations, American Nurses Association, American College of Emergency Room Physicians, Labor, who represents nursing and healthcare workers, including your father's union, the Teamsters, have endorsed this measure. And again, the burnout and the harm that is occurring out there threatens healthcare access in this country, let alone the life and health of the people who are the caregivers that are doing so much for it. So I really implore you to follow through what was started out in Trump 1.0 through the last administration and is now actively on the agenda of the Department of Labor today.
Well, I
With that, I
couldn't
yield back.
100% agree with you more, that we need to protect our workforce. My husband is in the medical field. I understand it dearly, and I will work with your office completely as we move through this process. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman. I recognize the gentleman. Gentleman's time has expired. I now recognize the gentlelady from Illinois, Ms. Miller.
Good morning, Secretary Chavez-DeRemer, and welcome back to the House.
Thank you, Congresswoman.
The Biden-Harris Department of Labor issued a nightmare scenario of regulations that were especially hard on small businesses and independent contractors. Among the pile of disastrous rules was the infamous heat standard, as well as the worker walk-around rule. As if that wasn't enough, Democrats wanted to further burden independent contractors with more regulations to stifle economic growth and job opportunities. And for all the grief the Democrats have given the Trump administration over cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, we didn't hear one word from them when thousands of healthcare workers, government employees, and military personnel were fired for refusing to take the COVID-19 vaccine. Most shockingly, Biden's Secretary of Labor never actually was Secretary of Labor. She was so radical, she couldn't get confirmed by the Democrat-controlled Senate, and yet she oversaw the Department of Labor for nearly 2 years. Furthermore, OSHA strayed far from their mission, opting to persecute small businesses rather than secure worker safety. Small businesses and independent contractors are at the heart of the American economy, and thankfully, President Trump is back in office to stop the insanity of the last 4 years. In 2021, the Biden-Harris administration issued an executive order to require employees to get vaccinated for COVID-19 or lose their jobs. As a result of this and similar state mandates, thousands of federal workers and military personnel were fired for refusing to take the COVID-19 vaccine. Is there anything the Department of Labor can do to correct this gross injustice and especially to ensure that it never happens again?
Thank you, Congresswoman, for all of those thoughts on protecting the American worker first. Working for the Trump administration, we are in line with protecting the American worker. I talked to the president on this issue in regards to we will always put the American worker at the pinnacle and keep them safe. we want to make sure that we're growing our economy and that we're developing and expanding the workforce, and we want to protect them at all costs. And I'll look to Congress for any congressional review that they would like to do. But it is my job, again, as the Labor Secretary, that we are enforcing the law and protecting the American workers as we go through either side of regulation or rulemaking and throughout this process.
So does that mean that our workers are not going to be forced to take experimental vaccines in the future or lose their jobs?
No, I appreciate there are no vaccine mandates under this administration.
Thank you. If made final in its current form, the proposed Biden-Harris heat standard would negatively impact many businesses, both medium and small. Most importantly, this rule would significantly impact the agriculture industry in my district and across the nation. Does the Department of Labor intend to abandon the proposed Biden-Harris heat standard?
No, thank you again. In regarding the standards of the occupational safety, ensuring the rules are prioritizing what is best for the marketplace, and again, the one-size-fits-all. I cannot comment on the specifics as it is currently in active rulemaking. We have to follow the Administrative Procedures Act, and so that is, we have to wait for all stakeholders to weigh in before I can talk about it at this time. What I will say, though, is that we do value the rulemaking process, and as OSHA continues to analyze the transcripts and we come forward, I'm glad to report back out to the committee on where we are in this process.
Thank you, and I expect that we will have reasonable regulations and
well, common sense regulations is the key to growing the economy. I don't think that that should surprise anybody here. At the Department of Labor, one of my goals ultimately is to always, again, make sure that our workers are safe and that they do get home safe. But compliance is as well. And when we work with our American companies and our businesses, that is number one goal, is that we help and not be an adversary from the federal level, but to be an ally for our businesses. That is America First policy. It is what this administration would like to see. If we're going to grow our workforce, we have to be amenable and work with our local businesses on the ground to understand what those market demands are, and then assist them in the compliance of doing so, and at the same time, keep our American workers safe first.
Thank you, and I think it will help our nation thrive and our communities. So OSHA went well beyond its original mission during the Biden-Harris administration, persecuting small businesses instead of ensuring worker safety. So I trust that OSHA is changing its approach when working as a safety partner. I think that's what you assured us.
The compliance component, I think, is key. And you know, just not weaponizing at all when we're in the enforcement section of the Department of Labor. We want to make sure that our businesses understand what the laws are, they follow the law, and how we can assist them in those compliance efforts. And we're doing that throughout all of our agencies, through those opinion letters, through our websites, through our education systems, that we can educate our you know, listen, our businesses, first and foremost, they're the front line to protecting the American worker. And I can tell you this, when I move throughout the country, they want to do the right thing. They are trying to do the right thing, and it is my job as the Department of Labor and through all of the sub-agencies is to assist them in doing the right thing. If then knowingly they choose not to, well, that's when the enforcement can happen.
I thank the Secretary, and I thank the gentlelady whose time has expired. And folks, let's start not asking the question in the last 10 seconds.
I won't answer anymore after.
My patience is going to wane here pretty soon. So, lady, and I recognize the gentleman from Wisconsin.
Thank you for coming on over here to our humble hearing room.
Hi, Congressman Grothman. I miss you.
Oh. Let's talk about 14C. Are you familiar with 14C?
I am.
That's the provision regarding giving people with special needs the ability to work for less than minimum wage.
Yes.
Section 14C certificates expand employment opportunities for individuals with disabilities. And it's always enjoyable, or one of the things I suggest you do if you haven't done it yet, is tour a facility where these 14C certificates are in use, and which people who maybe otherwise would not be able to find a job at all are given all the benefits of, you know, being able to work themselves. The Democrats in the Biden administration didn't like 14C. They felt it was taking advantage of somebody to allow them to work for $5 an hour. I personally am a big fan of 14C because I've toured so many different facilities in which these disabled folks are able to develop a little bit of independence, work on their own, the socialization with other people. The Biden administration tried to introduce a requirement that would make it very, very difficult to use 14C. Have you yet developed a view of 14C, and do you plan on withdrawing the Biden administration rule?
Well, Congressman, as you know, I cannot comment. It's an active rulemaking now. And, you know, developing that process is going to be working with Congress, and absent of any congressional action, as you know, many states have taken on their own determination of whether they want to continue with 14C or not. This is an important issue to so many members of Congress. It's really not a partisan issue. And I've heard from so many how it's important to them on one end and not on the other. But I look to the states respectively to determine if that's what they want. But because Department of Labor is in active rulemaking on this, I cannot comment specifically on where we are with that.
I'll ask you this. Have you personally toured any of these facilities?
I have not, Congressman.
I can't ask you to come to Wisconsin because you have to come to every state, but would you be like it someday if we set up a tour and see a few of them so you see the type of people whose lives would be affected and in some cases I would argue almost ruined?
Yes, I would be, I think it would be important to understand.
Absolutely.
Wisconsin it is.
We'll set something up, give you 3 or 4 of these things. Next thing is kind of, hopefully it's not too obscure. There are more than, in Wisconsin, we have more than 600 volunteer fire departments. I bet it's higher than that. That's what it says here. In February, OSHA issued a proposed rule with a new safety and health standard for emergency response, replacing the existing fire brigade standards. One of the goals, I think, by the way, of the Firemen's Union is to get rid of volunteer fire departments, which are such a huge part of America. And actually, when I first got involved in politics, I think in my assembly district, I had like 8 volunteer fire departments, and nobody had a full-time fire employee. Given concerns about feasibility and cost, and I would say more than that, just all the wonderful volunteer firemen, will the department commit to revisiting or revising the proposed OSHA rule to ensure life-saving emergency services are not undermined by federal overreach, and really just basically standing up to the Firemen's Union and saying, we don't mind it if local communities want to have volunteer departments?
Well, I can't speculate on what the Firemen's Union thinks about the volunteer firefighters. But what I will say is, again, while this is in rulemaking, I committed when I took on this job that I would look at and do an analysis on all rulemaking and regulation. And as we move through that process, I'll be able to update you and your office and this committee, and I can follow up with that. But we do want our nation's first responders safe, and that will include all of those first responders.
I don't even know, in your old congressional district, do you have a lot of volunteer firemen?
We do have volunteer fire departments really throughout the entire country, but yes.
Yeah, okay, super. We'll say this. President Trump signed Executive Order 14173, which rescinded Executive Order 11246. That was an order from 1965, a horrible, horrible order that established employment. Am I over here?
You're going over.
I'm committed to working with your office and can answer those.
Okay, thank you much.
Yep. From South Carolina, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you very much, Chairman Tim Willenberg, for your positive leadership. And indeed, Secretary, America appreciates your service, and we wish you best success.
Thank you.
By statute, the Department of Labor must ensure that employment of H-2A workers does not adversely affect domestic workers. To that end, the DOL has established the adverse effect wage rate, which is applied annually to H-2A employees. The national adverse effective wage rate has already more than doubled over the past 2 decades, making agricultural guest labor unaffordable for foreign employers and resulting in higher consumer costs. I'm concerned for the farmers and ranchers who use H-2A as the skyrocketing costs will only compound inflated input costs for energy and fertilizer. Other guest worker expenses like transportation and housing and burdens from several impending federal regulations and fees. There are bipartisan discussions in Congress in support of freezing the adverse effect wage rate, and I'm also concerned there is no actual effort on the annual basis to determine whether an adverse effect actually exists. At the department, have you considered making a determination as to an adverse effect actually exists, or discuss making other reforms to modernize and improving the adverse effect wage rate and H-2A program consistent with your authority under the law?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. I appreciate you bringing up the determination from the Department of Labor on how we address the H programs, in particular H-2A, H-2B, and as they affect our farmers, ranchers, and producers. We've heard this often, and what can be sustainable and unsustainable over time. As we continue through the rulemaking and that process, I work with my colleagues at the Department of Homeland as well as the Department of State to determine. We never want to displace the American worker, but we recognize that the workforce is needed for our farmers and our ranchers, and I've heard this throughout. So we will continue as we go through regulations and rulemaking on AWR. Very familiar, as I sat on that subcommittee in my time in Congress, to address the issues because it is unsustainable, and we have to make sure that we're protecting those farmers and ranchers. And I commit to you that I will continue to work with your office and many others as we address that, along with USDA Secretary Brooke Rollins.
Indeed, I appreciate you recognize that each community has a different workforce need. I know that in my home state, we have particular seasonal employment. We're getting ready for the peach season, and I want to make sure that Chairwoman Fox has sufficient ability to buy peaches. And so, and we like to point out, even to people in remote locations like Michigan, that South Carolina produces more peaches than another state called Georgia. Okay. But in addition to that, but hey, it's seasonal, and we have the same thing with row crops in my home county of Lexington. To do that, and how does the Department of Labor play in helping meet the local workforce needs?
Well, that's the determination on both angles. One, we want to develop the American workforce first and work with our partners at the state level. The second is we have seen the increase over the time of the visa program. The expansion has been tremendous because we cannot always find that workforce. But from the Department of Labor's perspective, it is my responsibility to test that market and then work with the Department of Homeland Secretary Noem, and then work with Congress on determining what that cap will be and then enforce those laws. We hear it often, we hear it every day, and it is my direction for the Department of Labor to almost we are working through it in my agency to have a specific sub-agency to determine and work with you all specifically just for the H programs because they have become so prominent in how we're going to address this. And you're correct, the one-size-fits-all no longer works. It's modernizing and streamlining the workforce that our American workers can thrive and our businesses can as well.
Again, I appreciate your being ahead of the curve. Additionally, the last administration final rule on H-2A adverse effect wage rate also made it difficult for employers to determine wages. What is the compliance of DOL to help agricultural employment determine wage rate?
We'll work with our state partners along. A lot of those are determined at the state level. We'll work with them to make sure that we are enforcing those, but they have to be in line with what is acceptable and not. And as we go through rulemaking and regulation, I will be reaching out to your offices and working with our stakeholders to determine what is best for the American economy.
Again, thank you so much for your leadership. I yield back.
Thank you.
I thank the gentleman for his produce advertising. You're a peach of a guy.
That's. Uh-oh, here we go.
Forgive me for that.
That's good. That's good.
I thank the gentleman. Now I recognize the ranking member, the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, thank you so much for being with us. And you've heard from many members on both sides who have thanked you for your phone calls. We hope that communication continues. It's my understanding that many of the job training programs have either been eliminated or block granted, but when the aggregate funding is added up, it's $1.6 billion less. Is that right?
Yes, yes, that is correct.
Okay.
On the proposed budget.
On the proposed
And I'll look for Congress for the ultimate budget.
Thank you. We've heard a comment about 14C. Most states have actually abandoned 14C, as you know, in favor of strategies that transform employees to competitive employment. As other states continue to abandon 14C, will you work with us to help those that need assistance to be able to earn a full minimum wage?
Yeah, I'm committed to your office and many others. Again, this is really not a partisan issue. This is really a personal issue to many members of Congress, so I'm committed to working with you on the technical assistance as needed.
Thank you. Could you tell us the status of OFCCP?
Yeah, through the executive order, that is, will continue to be, and through this budget will be confirmed that we will enforce all discrimination laws, anti-discrimination laws on the books, and this was duplicative, and it's an executive order that we are following through, and we'll wind down OFCCP. Well, and now it's in litigation, so I guess we'll have to see about that.
Can you tell us the status of the Bureau of Labor Statistics?
Independent of the Department of Labor, we want to make sure that we are not putting our thumb on the scale there, and they're independent of those numbers, and we want the most accurate data as possible.
Does that mean they're going to keep the 29 USC has a provision that Bureau of Labor Statistics, under the direction of the Secretary of Labor, shall, and then it goes on.
So let's see. I can get you the specifics to that. I don't know if you finished your sentence, what the question was exactly.
You're answering the question.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so we need to follow up on that.
Sure.
Minsha, as you pointed out, closed a number of offices that have been reopened. Who decided to close those offices, and what standard was used to reopen them?
That was GSA before I was even confirmed. And so we've worked with them specifically to have them understand the importance statutorily that we need to have that in the Department of Labor. And I think since then 34 offices have been released, but I can get you the specifics because actually the fluidity of that happens every single day.
All of them have not been reopened?
I couldn't give you, it's not all, but I don't know the exact number. I think we're at 34, but I don't know exactly, and I'm glad to follow up with your office and give you those.
Are there other agencies on the shutdown list?
I don't know specifically which agencies you're referring to.
Any agencies that have regional offices being shut down by people that out of the blue? You said GSA, that wasn't under.
Well, GSA is the one who had determined those leases, but now that that's under litigation, I can't really speak to the specifics of that, and I don't know of any future shutdowns that you're referring to, unless you ask specific.
Well, if you don't, that answers the question.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Injured federal employees around the country are receiving emails telling them that hearings that they need to resolve their workers' compensation claims are being canceled because the department has terminated its contract for court reporters needed to transcribe the hearings. Are you aware about that? And if so, who decided to cancel the contracts and why?
I'm not aware of that, and I can have my team follow up with your office.
Okay. Are you aware of any businesses run by Elon Musk that are under investigation by the Department of Labor?
No. Do you have that one for me? I want to give you a specific on this. You don't have it? Okay, I'll follow up with your office.
When he was running through the...
There was no, I have no specifics on that.
Okay. I think the answer is actually yes, but if we can follow through on that, that'd be helpful.
If my team has it for me before this ends, I'll give it to you.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I think the 10-second rule is about to kick in.
Don't get gavelled out.
But I would like to thank the Secretary for her comments.
And I want to thank the gentleman for his attentiveness to the time. The gentleman. And I recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Kiley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary Chavez-DeRemer, good afternoon.
Nice to see you, Congressman.
Good to see you as well. Congratulations on your confirmation by the Senate. The last administration seemed to think that Senate confirmation was optional, so it's great to have a legitimate Senate-confirmed Secretary of Labor, and the fact that the last nominee for your role got bipartisan opposition, whereas you got overwhelming bipartisan support, I think is very telling. It shows that we have a Secretary of Labor who is on the side of American workers. I wanted to ask you about the connection between our K-12 education system and workforce issues, which is, of course, implicit in the very setup of this committee. It is the Education and Workforce Committee, which you were once a member of. But in many ways, at the level of policy, these two things have been disconnected for a long time. You know, we've kind of got into this mentality that the purpose of our K-12 education system is to prepare students for college and that everyone should go to college. And we're starting to see a little bit of a swing of the pendulum back towards supporting things like career education. And I had the chance to speak with a group that assembled in my district earlier this week for a workforce summit at our local community college. And they had folks who are leaders in higher education and K-12 education and major employers from the area thinking about how can we work together to prepare folks for the workforce of the future. So, I shared some of my thoughts about what we could do at the level of federal policy, but wanted to give you a chance if you were able to speak with them about what your thoughts might be. And indeed, I hope you could at some point, actually, on your tour across the country, stop by my district. But what are your thoughts about what we'd like to see in our K-12 education system from a workforce perspective?
Yeah, thank you, Congressman. The whole point of the America at Work tour is to do just that, listen to what's happening on the ground. And then culminating really my experiences as a former mayor, as a business owner, and as a congresswoman, and now secretary, to say what's best for the local communities. If we lead, again, from the American workers' perspective and the local community perspective, we know we can offer the future workforce through K-12 education and the future workforce of America that students will back into these degrees based on market demand. Listening to the private sector say what they actually need and then drawing A to B and saying, here's how we're going to get you there. So many times I'm talking to the 25 to 27-year-old who's being reintroduced to the community college, who still is working 40 hours a week, who now then goes to school at night just to gain that extra certificate so that they can improve on their life for their families. It is those kind of stories that I'm hearing over and over again, that they want the flexibility to earn while they learn, to understand that this is where they want to have a choice in their education. And then as it relates to K through 12 and working again with Secretary McMahon at the Department of Education, we are consistently trying to understand how we're going to invest in that future workforce, and that's going to take investment on the front end of our K through 12 education. So I'm looking forward to working with her as we move through this process, and then working with our respective state partners to understand what does California need specifically that's different than Oregon, that's different than Indiana, that's different than Michigan, different than Utah. And so as I travel around the country, that is my focus, is talking to the American worker and understanding exactly what they need, and then coming back to the President of the United States, having him understand that, and as we put those toward our America First policies, then I'll look to Congress to pass this big, beautiful bill that needs to be passed so that we can move forward with investing in our future workforce.
I think it's a tremendous approach and a great vision for the future of education and the workforce. Thank you for your leadership. I yield back.
Thank you, Congressman.
I thank the gentleman, and before I go to recognize the gentlelady from Arizona, I recognize the gentlelady from Connecticut, Ms. Hayes, for a request.
Thank you, Ms. Chair. I just asked unanimous consent to enter the articles I referenced earlier so that the Secretary can have them. A New York Times article, Trump taps Palantir to compile data on Americans, and a Newsweek article, quote, Trump flipped on us, MAGA reacts to potential national citizens database, end quote. I want to enter them both into the record. So
without objection, so ordered. I now recognize, under Rule Committee 9, we'll now question Secretary Chavez-DeRemer under the 5-minute rule. And I will attempt to keep a little bit more closely that 5 minutes of questioning today. Don't force me to do too much in latitude on that, though there will be some flexibility. We want to make sure that all members, including those sitting at the end of the dais, have an opportunity to ask questions as well in a reasonable time period. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. Madam Secretary, association health plans, AHPs, are a type of group plan that allow multiple employers to band together to purchase health coverage in a reasonable fashion, very much taken after unions' opportunity because of the size and numbers. In 2018, the first Trump administration published a rule expanding AHPs that produced significant savings on health care coverage for covered employers. In April 2024, the Biden-Harris administration rescinded the 2019 Trump rule without any alternative. So can you discuss the advantages of allowing small businesses to band together to offer coverage through AHPs?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, Chairman. It is one of the things that I hear often about the cost of health care. President Trump has been addressing that by lowering the cost of prescription drugs. But as we band together, and as you mentioned, somewhat of the coalition of businesses getting together in order to be able to purchase health care plans for their employees, I think is key to lowering those costs. And I know that my office is working with you on this piece of legislation for technical assistance. It's one of the honors, really, of the Department of Labor and other agencies that we can do with all congressmen and women. If they're working on legislation with their colleagues, that I can be useful with my department heads to give you that technical assistance. But we need to lower premiums and out-of-pocket costs for our employees, expanding affordable care for the American worker.
We appreciate that because, frankly, in the end, it provides better coverage as well.
That's right.
And we want that for our employees and the benefit to employers to offer those special benefits. Last year, the committee learned that the Employees Benefits Security Administration, EBSA, shared secret information obtained during investigations with plaintiffs' attorneys. What steps has and will DOL take to understand the extent of aid that career staff have given and are giving to plaintiffs' attorneys, and the extent of confidential information that has been shared and is being shared?
Well, as you know, Chairman, any sort of leak that comes out of any agency or the Department of Labor is concerning when there's allegations that that confidential information would be leaked under the Biden administration. Under my leadership, this is unacceptable, and I would not tolerate it from anybody to leak that information of privacy. I am aware that your committee has asked the Department of the Inspector General to investigate this, and I cannot comment on an investigation if there is one happening, and that would be true for anybody who is asking that question. But again, I will cooperate fully with the Inspector General's office to determine the best outcome in the review under the Biden administration's enforcement programs to make sure that we are addressing any possible leaks that would come out of the Department of Labor.
Thank you. Human trafficking is an issue that remains one of the greatest challenges of our time. Roughly 1 in 6 endangered runaways reported to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is likely a victim of child sex trafficking. These are horrid crimes committed by those who prey on innocent and vulnerable victims. During the last Congress, I sponsored the Enhancing Detection of Human Trafficking Act. This legislation offers a viable avenue to equip Department of Labor personnel with the necessary tools and information to understand and ascertain where that sexual exploitation, human trafficking has taken place. Can I get your commitment to review the bill as it's reintroduced to ensure it takes the most effective steps for the Department of Labor to take part in the fight against human trafficking?
Absolutely, Chairman. We in Congress and anybody in the United States should never tolerate any child trafficking, any human trafficking, any child labor violations, and it is my commitment to you that I will work with your office and all offices to combat that at all costs. We will double down if knowingly we know someone is breaking the law and have our inspectors address this always.
Appreciate that.
Of course.
What are your views, Madam Secretary, on opening avenues and increasing accessibility to pursue short-term educational skills training opportunities?
This is where you'll see my smile, because I can tell you, as I'm on the road and understanding the need for workforce demands as we move through skilling and reskilling or upskilling our workforce, that we have to address at all costs, that not all are going to receive a 4-year degree, that we have to offer that in our local communities and work with our community colleges and our technical schools so that we have access to those degrees so that our workforce is ready to go on day one. This is a question that I get asked often on the road, and I will work with the Department of Labor for the accessibility and flexibility of the modernization of the current workforce that we are seeing today.
Thank you. Thank you. My time has expired.